Chapter 136. It's a pity that there are only 5 words. It's not satisfying enough. The emperor held his wife's hand and sighed with emotion. His face was full of regret. Furthermore, other people don't dare to say it to my face. Don't you know that if we're talking about the level of appreciation and analysis, I still have it. But if we're talking about the skill of drawing and copying, it is a bit annoying. I tried using the double hook method last night and found that I couldn't copy the charm of those 5 words. The emperor smiled and suggested, "If your majesty really likes it, why not let the ministers in the court who are good at calligraphy try?" The emperor patted the back of her hand and laughed heartily. Shaking his head, he said, "It looks like you still understand my intentions." After the court meeting ended, I forced those old fellows to stay. At this moment, they are locked up in the royal study copying. I told them that regardless of whether their granddaughter is 1 year old or married, if they can't copy out the first 5 words, I will not let them go. For the sake of the 5 characters, flowers bloom on the shore of heaven. The Tang Imperial Palace added a lot of fun. However, no matter how much the emperor loved this book, it was just for leisure. In order to avoid being nagged by the censors, the emperor did not use the official agencies in the imperial court. He only sent people from the palace to look for it in the city of Chan. He also told some of the officials who were close to him and asked them to help him inquire among the people. Several months had passed. The most famous calligraphy shops in Chang had been searched, and the most famous calligraphers of the Tang Empire had been called to the palace to ask. But they still couldn't find the mysterious calligrapher. Even those famous calligraphers who had many students could not understand the style of the 5 words. The main reason for the current situation was still people's fixed thinking. From the Emperor of Tang to the old officials who were tricked into the imperial study to the great calligraphers among the common people, they were all amazed by the skillful use of the brush, the straight and broad structure, the enchanting and proud ink momentum, and the agile and elegant charm of the scroll. In their opinion, this mysterious calligrapher must be a reclusive master who had immersed himself in the art of calligraphy for decades. Even if a person with such a marvelous ability was hidden among the common people, he must be quietly cultivating in the bookstores of aristocratic families that had been passed down for hundreds of years. It was impossible for him to set up a stall on the street to sell calligraphy. It was precisely because of this preconceived idea that no one thought of going to the fragrance workshop to ask those poor scholars who sold their calligraphy, and no one thought of inquiring about whether there were any newly opened calligraphy shops in the slums. Naturally, no one could connect the piece of calligraphy that caused a disturbance in the imperial study with the unknown old brush pen shop on Lin 47th Street. One day, several tourists from the Great River Kingdom came to Lin 47th Street after visiting the Chang, an imperial palace from afar. They casually strolled into the ordinary-looking calligraphy shop at the entrance of the street. They looked at the ordinary scrolls hanging on the wall with their hands behind their back. They could not help but frown and shake their heads. When they saw a painting, their eyes suddenly lit up and they exclaimed, "Chang, and of the Tang Empire, is really full of hidden talents. A random bookstore on the street can actually hide a very good ink scroll." "Little girl, is your boss here?" Sang Sang was eating a bowl of chicken noodles. When she heard someone calling her, she raised her dark little face and answered with a smile, "Boss is not here. If you want to ask about the price, this painting is priced at 3,000 gold ingots, non-negotiable." An ordinary painting was priced at 3,000 gold ingots, and it was specifically stated that it was non-negotiable. What kind of style was this? This must be the style of the Great River Kingdom's sage of calligraphy, Mr. Wang. In his heyday, the tourists from the Great River Kingdom were startled when they heard this. They were so angry that they laughed. They did not bother to say anything else and left with a flick of their sleeves. It is said that the people of Chang are generous and hospitable. I think the people of Chang are so poor that they are crazy. As a certain person and a certain handmaiden had more and more silver notes on their waists, a certain person's ink scroll was getting more and more expensive until it was unreasonably expensive. These days, the old brush pen shop could often see the shocked and speechless expressions of the customers, and could often hear the angry words of the customers before they left. Sang Sang was already familiar with this scene and even a little numb. She lowered her head and continued to eat chicken noodles. Now she finally understood that although a bowl of chicken noodles could buy 6 bowls of hot and sour noodle slice soup, the chicken soup with drops of oil was really fragrant. Ning Kei came out of the back house, playing with 2 smooth silver balls made of silver ingots. He leaned against the door of the shop like a spoiled brat and looked at the back of the customers in the middle of the street. He did not feel that he was degrading the quality of the people of Chang'an and said mockingly, "Don't ask about the price if you can't afford it. Sang Sang, close the door, hot pot." Spring passed, autumn came, and winter arrived. It was now the deep winter of the 13th year of the Tang Empire's Tianqi era. Ning Kei and Sang Sang had been in Chang'an for almost a year. These days, he studied in the academy and was deliberately forgotten by his classmates, so he had more time to cultivate and chat with Chen Pippi. Sang Sang stayed at Lin 47th Street every day to look after the shop whose business was getting worse. Occasionally, she would accept Li Yu's invitation to visit the princess's mansion, and the two became more and more familiar. Ning Kei could not understand the growing friendship between Her Highness and the little handmaiden. In the end, he could only attribute it to fate. After eating a fragrant hot pot and splurging 4 plates of fresh-cut mutton, Ning Kei warmed his feet and snuggled into bed. Listening to the howling wind through the cracks of the window, he rubbed his slightly cold face and said angrily, "It hasn't snowed for a long time. Why is the weather so cold? Chang, and is suffering in the summer? Who is the irresponsible person who made this conclusion?" Sang Sang smiled, took off her outer coat, and snuggled into the other side of the bed. She rubbed her little hands that were cold and red from the washing water and said, "Young master, you should be content. Our life now is much better than when we were in the city of Wei." This was a very sincere comment. Now that the master and the handmaiden had more than 10,000 taels of silver under their bed, and they also received a large sum of dividends from the gambling house in the western city every month. In the subtext of their hearts, it was, "We are not short of money now, too rich, too damn rich. Since they had so much money, they should use it to improve their lives." Although the master and the handmaiden still had the habit of being thrifty, it was easy to go from frugality to extravagance. The hot and sour sliced noodles were replaced by shredded chicken noodle soup, and the pickled vegetable porridge was replaced by hot mutton. It was so cold a few days ago that they even built a new Kong in the house. Now, they were burning silver charcoal, drinking new tea, and the house was as warm as spring. Compared with their previous life of more than 10 years, the current life was simply wonderful. Ning Kei complained about the dry and cold winter in Chang, but he was just saying it. Now he could finally see the mysterious cultivation world, where he could use his psyche power to control the chi of heaven and earth, spin the silver ball in his hand, and lift the pieces of paper on the table at will. Well, because the psyche power that he could export out of his body was too weak, and the chi of heaven and earth that he could control was too thin, so the pieces of paper flew more disorderly than feathers, and the silver ball spun more slowly than Shin Pippi, but he really could not find any dissatisfaction. Outside the window, the north wind gradually tightened, and the night passed without a word. When they woke up the next morning, they saw endless white snow covering the streets, alleys, palaces, and buildings of Chang'an. Silver trees quietly poked out of the streets and looked at the pedestrians. Ning Kei put on a coat and stood side by side with Sang Sang at the door of the old brush pen shop. Looking at the beautiful scenery and thinking about his encounters in life in the past year, he actually saw a new meaning in the snow that he was tired of seeing in the city of Wei. "These days are really good," he praised contentedly. Sang Sang smiled and nodded beside him. They lived a peaceful and happy life in Chang and city, without the blood of revenge and the depression of not being able to get what they wanted. They lived back and forth between the academy and the old brush pen shop. The master and the servant gradually grew up and were gradually forgotten by the people around them. Just like that, they willingly disappeared in these beautiful days. She did needlework and washed the dishes, while he wrote a scroll and looked at the books he copied from the old library. In this seemingly monotonous repetition, the hour hand began to turn again. Time slipped away peacefully. The winter solstice, the new year, and the lantern festival slipped away in the liveliness, and the mutton hot pot, hot tea, and ink slipped away in the silence. In the blink of an eye, it was another spring in the 14th year of the Tianqi era. Another spring arrived. The catkins were all over the sky. The plump figures of the Chong and girls, who had been bound by cotton-padded jackets and fur coats for an entire winter, finally had a chance to breathe. Looking at those girls who shivered in the chilly early spring breeze but wanted to open their chests to reveal their white and tender skin, Ning Ke lifted the curtains and went to the academy with a heart full of appreciation and gratitude. After nodding to Sidhu Ilan, who was sitting in the front row, he walked to his own table in the back. No other classmates would greet him or even look at him. He had long been accustomed to such indifference and disregard, so he did not care. After sitting down, he took out the lesson plan of etiquette and began to review it. This morning was the etiquette lesson. The etiquette instructor of classroom 3 of the academy was the associate professor of etiquette, Chao Jifeng. He was also the psyche master in the see-through state of Yin Kingdom, who had beaten the grandson of the general, Chu Zhongtian, into a pig's head on the first day of the academy. No one dared to slight such an experienced and famous teacher who was ruthless and had deep feelings for the Tang children. The bell rang quietly, and Associate Professor Chao Jifeng walked in slowly. What made the students of Classroom 3 feel a little strange was that the teacher had changed from his usual cold and stern demeanor. There was a hint of unconcealable joy in his old eyes. What happened next was even more unexpected to the students. Chao Jifeng looked at the students below the stage and pondered for a moment. Just when the students thought he would put down the heavy book under his armpit and start his routine criticism, he coughed lightly and stretched out his right hand and flicked it in the air a few times. Then he said seriously, "There's a change in the chi of heaven and earth today, so it is not suitable for class. Dismissed." After saying this, Chao Jifeng turned and left the study room without hesitation, leaving behind a room full of shocked and speechless students and a sudden burst of discussion. What's going on? What's wrong with the professor? Is the instructor sick? If he's sick, he should ask for sick leave from the academy. Why is he playing this trick? What do you mean by there's a change in the chi of heaven and earth today? The chi of heaven and earth changes all the time. It's not like it just started to change today. Damn, what a cruel trick. Can we use this trick even if we don't want to go to class in the future? Chu Yuxian lightly bumped Ning Ke's shoulder and said incredulously, "What kind of madness has old Chao suffered from today? How would I know?" Ning Ke was also extremely puzzled, but it was better for him not to go to class. He could spend more time in the old library. Looking at the etiquette lesson plan that was just spread out on the table, he thought to himself, if I had known this would happen, why did I spend so much effort to organize it last night? He shook his head and began to organize the books, preparing to leave. At this moment, someone in front of the study room said, "Didn't you see the joy on Professor Chao's face just now? That's because an important person is coming to Chong and City today. The professor is in a hurry to go out of the city to welcome him. That's why he made such a lame excuse." What kind of important person could make old Chao so excited? I remember on the last winter solstice, the minister of the Ministry of Rites came to give consolation money to the instructors. It was 300 taels of silver. The minister, old Chao's face was still as gloomy as if the emperor of Yin Kingdom was dead. It's inevitable for people whose country has fallen to have some resentment. What you said is too unkind, the student in front said with a smile. As for who the important person is today and why he could make Professor Chao so excited, it actually has something to do with these things. Although Professor Chao is a senior instructor of the academy, don't forget that he is first and foremost a Yin. What do you mean? The important person who is coming to Chong and City today is Prince Longqing of the Yin Kingdom. How could Professor Chao not be excited? Who would believe that? If he cherishes his country, he would be excited to see the royal family of his country. The Crown Prince of Yin has always been a guest in Chong and City. Why didn't I see old Chao go to the city to pay his respects every day? Ignorant fool. Chu Yu listened closely to the argument in front of him and whispered sarcastically to Ning Ke, "The Crown Prince of Yin is just a hostage. How could he be compared with Prince Longqing? You know, for the Yin people, after being suppressed by the Tang Empire for hundreds of years, they have long regarded Prince Longqing as the last hope of revival. How could old Chao not be excited when he knew that he was coming? Prince Longqing? Ning Ke asked curiously. Is he the brother of the crown prince of Yin? Blood brother. Ning Ke frowned and said, then why would the Yin people place the hope of revival on this? Prince Longqing? Even if the Yin emperor passes away in the future, the crown prince of Yin should inherit the throne. This is the problem. As far as I know, most people in the Yin kingdom do not agree to let the crown prince inherit the throne. They think that Prince Longqing should inherit the throne. Many people think that Prince Longqing is a rare genius. Hearing the words rare genius, Ning Ke's knitted eyebrows relaxed. He tidied up the books and said with a smile, this is also a genius. That is also a genius. I have been in Chong and city for less than a year, but I am really tired of hearing these two words. If geniuses are really rare, there might not be too many of them in the Tianqi era. Wow! Chu Yuxian looked at him and said jokingly, you are usually quiet and calm. I thought you did not care about what happened that day, nor did you care about the attitude of your classmates towards you. I did not expect you to still remember it and despise geniuses like Xie Qingyan. But you have to know that Prince Longqing is not Xie Qingyan. Ning Ke stopped what he was doing and looked at him, waiting to hear more. Prince Longqing is a real genius. Chu Yuxian said seriously. You are really talking nonsense. Ning Ke said angrily, and then he was slightly stunned by the discussion coming from the front. The four words Prince Longqing caused many exclamations of shock and admiration in the study room, and then a long discussion. Few people like Ning Ke, who had lived in the frontier fortress for a long time, had never heard of this name. However, there were still some people who had the same question as him. What kind of person was Prince Longqing? How could he make the people of Yin place their hopes of reviving their country on him? How could he make Professor Chao Jifeng so excited that he lost his composure? Although he is a prince of the Yin kingdom, after his brother was sent to Chong and city as a hostage, the royal family of the Yin kingdom sent him to travel around the world to learn. He stayed in the Yueluan kingdom, the Great River Kingdom, and the South Jin Kingdom for a few months, and then entered the Revelation Institute of Haotian Taoism in the West Hill Divine Kingdom to study. He became the first in his first year. There was no doubt that the academy in the south of Chong and was the oldest, most prestigious, and most respected academy in the world. However, other countries also had their own famous academies. The Revelation Institute of the West Hill Divine Kingdom was personally taught by the Divine Hall's divine priests and was considered the best. It was naturally extraordinary to be able to stand out in such a place. However, this alone could not explain too much. At least, it could not intimidate the proud students in the academy. In the third year after Prince Longqing entered the Revelation Institute, he followed his teacher to preach to various places. That autumn, in the Lang Temple on Hua Mountain, the instructor of the Revelation Institute and the Vedanta of the Buddhism sect debated and retreated. Prince Longqing smiled and stood up, debating with the 7 disciples of the Buddhism sect for 3 days and 3 nights, winning 7 rounds in a row. He even made the eldest disciple of the Lang Temple vomit blood and fall to the ground. In the end, the Lang Temple elder who lived in seclusion rang the bell and spoke. Only then did he smile and shut up, returning to his seat. The Lang Temple elder praised him for his profound knowledge and unparalleled debating skills. If he could enter the Buddhism sect, he would be able to understand the essence of reincarnation in less than 10 years and be guided to an unattainable place. How could the West Hill Divine Palace allow the Buddhism sect to snatch away their favorite disciple? In the 4th year after Prince Longqing entered the Revelation Institute, the hierarch of Haotian Taoism accepted him as a core disciple and even allowed him to start learning how to deal with the affairs of the judicial department of the Divine Hall. Now I heard that Prince Longqing is only 1 step away from entering the knowing destiny state and is highly valued by Haotian Taoism. He is already the 2nd most powerful person in the judicial department, specializing in guarding against the heterodox demons. He is great authority, the second most powerful person in the judicial department of the Divine Hall. A student gasped and said, "Such a bigwig can't do much in the Tang Empire, but if he were in the South Jin Kingdom or the Great River Kingdom, even the Emperor would not dare to disobey him." Then why did he come to the Tang Empire, to Chang'an? Because Prince Long Qing wants to enter our academy to study. Enter the academy? Would such a bigwig come to be our classmate? You wish. Such a bigwig has been studying in the Revelation Institute for many years and is now an important figure in the West Hill Divine Palace. How could he be our classmate? Of course, his purpose of entering the academy is to enter the second floor. He came to Chang, and this time not only to enter the second floor to continue his study, but also to replace his brother, the Crown Prince of Yin, as a hostage. The Emperor of Yin is getting older and weaker, and no one knows when he will pass away. His Majesty values filial piety and agreed to let the Crown Prince of Yin return to Chang and to take care of his parents, but asked the Yin Kingdom to replace him with an important member of the royal family. After thinking about it, who else is qualified except for Prince Long Qing? The West Hill Divine Palace has cultivated Prince Long Qing for many years, and it has proven that he is indeed very talented. The Yin Kingdom values his talent and his close relationship with the West Hill Divine Palace. They see him as the hope of the Yin Kingdom's revival. In their eyes, this prince is much more important than the Crown Prince who has been a hostage in Chang and for many years. So what I don't understand is why the Yin Kingdom actually agreed to the Tang Empire's request this time. Through the introductions and compliments of the dozen or so students from prestigious families, a clear picture gradually formed in the minds of the Academy students. A young member of the royal family, a young cultivator who was about to enter the knowing destiny state, carrying the hope of the Yin Kingdom's revival, and an important person to be cultivated by the West Hill Divine Palace. Who else could such a person be but a talent of the mandate of heaven? Thinking of Prince Long Qing's elegance, the young and proud students in the study room could not help but have extremely complicated feelings. Some were envious, some admired, and some were indistinct. But this indistinctness had no power in front of the other party's dazzling history and reputation. For a moment, the study room became strangely quiet. Chu Yuxian looked at his classmates and added with a smile, "You have forgotten the most famous thing about Prince Long Qing. You should know that this prince is extremely handsome, and some even describe him as beautiful. In addition, he is well-educated and has a magnificent temperament. When he first entered the Yueluan Kingdom in his youth, he attracted the attention of countless young girls in the Yueluan Kingdom. It is said that on that day, many pairs of embroidered shoes were trampled, and many girls' voices were broken by his cries, and many pairs of eyes were red from crying. This was a very famous anecdote. Of course, the students in the study room knew about it, but most of the young men who spoke with confidence and composure were willing to mention this part. Now that Chu Yuxian said this, the young girls sitting in the front row of the study room suddenly thought of this rumor. Their youthful faces suddenly lit up. Even Miss Gao, who had been a little depressed recently, opened her eyes wide and unconsciously raised the corner of her mouth slightly. "I say, sisters, it is too late for you to be infatuated now." Chu Yuxian was best at stabbing once and then stabbing again. He looked at the girls with a sneaky smile and said, "Prince Long Qing has long been engaged to Princess Lu Qinjia of the Yueluan Kingdom. She is also the most famous infatuated girl in the world. Back when Prince Long Qing was studying Buddhism in the Yueluan Kingdom, he fell in love with Princess Lu Qinjia at first sight. Later on, this princess traveled thousands of miles to the Revelation Institute to study, just to spend time with Prince Long Qing. How would you have the chance? Everyone knows that Lu Qinjia is infatuated with flowers. You're no match for her at all." When the girls in the study room heard this, their expressions became somewhat awkward. But could they still argue with Chu Yuxian's words? They could only purse their lips and lower their heads in grievance. When Situ Alan saw the expressions of her female companions, she could not help but frown and talk about other topics, diluting the lovesickness in the study room. Lu Qinjia, the flower addict of the Yueluan Kingdom, was a famous beauty in the world. Other than that, there were two other girls in the world who were compared to her. One of them was the last female disciple of the great calligrapher of the Great River Kingdom. It was said that she was extremely gentle and virtuous. She loved calligraphy, so she was called the calligraphy addict. The other was a mysterious female disciple of the Revelation Institute of West Hill. It was said that she was extremely gentle and beautiful, but her heart was focused on Taoism. Other than cultivation, she had no other thoughts. She was called the Tao addict. Speaking of which, both the flower addict and the calligraphy addict know her name. It is just that the Tao addict has always been extremely mysterious. The world only knows that there is such a beauty in the West Hill Divine Kingdom, but they do not know her name or where she is now. Situ Ilan listened to the curious discussion of her classmates. After a moment of hesitation, she said, "Indeed, not many people know the name of the Tao addict, but I heard that she is now the #1 figure in the judicial department of the Divine Hall. I'm alive again. It turns out that adjusting for jet lag is also very painful. Getting up at 6 o'clock is not something a human should do. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation." Chapter 137. In the previous chapter, I wrote the words, "rare genius." Well, I have talked too much with Zhang Xiaohua recently. My poor math skills have been influenced by this famous math addict to be worse. Another thing to tell you, I have used the word ink scroll many times before. I know what it means, but I think this Tang is not the Tang dynasty, and this ink scroll is not the Tang dynasty. But there are too many places in today's chapter, so I feel something is wrong and easy to be criticized. So I changed all the ink scroll that should be changed into writing sections. Of course, this is in my manuscript, and I didn't change it in the VIP section. I am lazy. I have a rest tomorrow. The rumored beauty Tao addict was actually the top figure in the judicial department of the West Hill Divine Palace. Hearing this, the noisy study room suddenly became silent. All the students looked at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes. What kind of charming woman was she? How could she suppress Prince Long Qing? Don't doubt it. Do you really think that women are born inferior to men? Situ Ilan looked at the expressions of her classmates and knew that some of them did not believe it. She could not help but frown and said, "That beauty Tao addict is very mysterious and rarely shows herself in public. It is natural that people do not know her ability. But I have heard that Prince Long Qing does not show any dissatisfaction whenever he mentions his superior. That beauty Tao addict should be very young, right?" An academy student sighed and said, "The West Hill Divine Kingdom is really a place shown by the glory of Hao Yin. It actually has so many young geniuses. Not to mention that Tao addict, after Prince Long Qing enters the academy, where can we find someone who can compete with him?" Jean Wucai listened to this and slightly frowned. She wanted to say something, but finally did not speak. A female companion next to her looked at her expression and said for her with a smile, "Our academy has such a person like Mr. Xie. Can't we take him out to compete with Prince Long Qing?" Mr. Xie just entered the no-doubt state at the beginning of last autumn, while Prince Long Qing is only one step away from the knowing destiny state. No matter how I think about it, he should be a powerhouse in the upper see-through state. There are at least 5 levels between them. How can they compete? That student did not give face to his female classmates. He sneered and said, "And even if Mr. Xie can beat Prince Long Qing in poetry and mathematics, don't forget that he is from the South Jin Kingdom. What does he have to do with the Tang Empire? Who said the Tang Empire does not have talents?" Situ Ilan frowned and said, "Wang Jinglu is said to be invincible below the knowing destiny state. He is at most a few years older than Prince Long Qing. As long as Prince Long Qing hasn't entered the knowing destiny state, he won't be able to defeat Wang Jinglu." That student frowned and said, "Wang Jinglu is indeed qualified to be compared with Prince Long Qing, but he has not appeared for a long time. I don't know where he has gone." Chu Zhongtian glanced at Situ Ilan. Seeing that she did not object, he smiled and said to his classmates, "I heard that Wang Jinglu was sent by His Majesty to work for the Defender General of the state. Even if Prince Long Qing came to Chong, and he could not violate the military discipline and come back to do anything. So we'd better forget about this person. Ning Ke had been quietly listening to the discussion of the students behind the study room. He found that no one mentioned Prince Long Qing again. Instead, they talked about the talent problem of the Tang Empire. So he did not continue to listen. He simply packed up his things and was ready to leave the study room for the old library. Even if we don't mention Wang Jinglu, there will still be other talents in the Tang Empire. Probably because Xie Qingyun was directly considered not to be comparable with Prince Long Qing, Jean Wucai's mood was a little strange. She stood up and looked at her classmates with a smile and said softly, "Not only those who cultivate Taoism can be called talents. As long as they are proficient in military, arithmetic, essays, poetry, and calligraphy, they're all talents." I heard from my grandfather that the palace has recently made a big noise because of a calligraphy section. His Majesty loves that calligraphy very much. Grandfather also said that the calligrapher is a great talent in calligraphy. Can't such a person be regarded as a talent of the Tang Empire? I've also heard about this. Chun Zixian, the young master of the bookstore, glanced at Jean Wucai and mumbled, "Several groups of people from the palace have come to ask my father, but they really don't know who wrote that calligraphy. But I heard from the eunuchs in the palace that Libationer and several great calligraphers all confirmed that the mysterious calligrapher must have been immersed in calligraphy for many years, so that he could have that kind of writing strength structure. This can't be regarded as a talent of the young generation, right?" Jean Wucai just wanted to bypass the previous topic, so she naturally wouldn't answer this. She smiled gently and lightly changed the topic, asking, "Grandfather copied that section in the Imperial Study a month ago. How about your family?" "My family runs a bookstore. How can it compare with Miss Wucai's family?" Chun Zixian replied with a smile. "It's just that the palace urged me, so my family helped to contact 2 great calligraphers to enter the palace to copy 2 scrolls." The topics of chatting among the students in the academy had always been irregular. Today, Professor Chao Jifeng gave everyone a holiday, so they had a lot of time to chat, so the topic naturally changed very quickly. Previously, they were still talking about Prince Long Qing and the Tao Addict beauty, but now, everyone's attention was completely attracted by the legendary calligraphy section. After a few discussions, the students were surprised to find that everyone actually knew about this matter. That calligraphy section had already become the focus of discussion of the upper class in Chang and city in recent months. A calligraphy section that no one knew who wrote and why it appeared in the Imperial Study made His Majesty love it so much that he directly ordered the ministers and calligraphers to copy in person. If one didn't know the ins and outs of this matter, and didn't know what was written on the calligraphy section, then there was no way for one to participate in the tea-drinking and chit-chatting of the departments in Yamen. His Majesty rewarded Grandfather with a copy of the Imperial calligraphy, but it's a pity that Grandfather didn't let me see it. Jean Wucai said softly. In fact, the whole Chang and city knew that the Tang Emperor loved calligraphy, but his writing strength was not good. The students tried hard to hold back their laughter, thinking that Libationer naturally couldn't bear to see His Majesty's imperial calligraphy being seen by others. Miss Gao, who had never talked much at this time, hearing Jean Wucai's gentle and soft words, somehow felt a little unhappy. She said with a little bit of pride, "My family was also given a copy, but it's a pity that it's not the imperial calligraphy, but it uses the double hook method, which is said to be very similar to the original." The double hook method was a method of copying. It hooked out with a thin line along the 2 sides of the original, and then filled the outline with ink. The finished product produced by this method of copying was very close to the original, so it was quite precious and was often used to copy famous works. Listening to Miss Gao's words, the students were once again surprised. They praised that the unknown calligraphy section was indeed deeply favored by His Majesty. They also secretly discussed that there was someone in the palace whose family was indeed deeply favored by His Majesty. They were actually able to receive the double hook copybook. What the emperor liked must be even more, not to mention what the Tang Emperor liked. Therefore, in recent years, the whole Tang Empire loved calligraphy very much, and calligraphers were highly respected. Now that the noble houses in Chang and city all knew that His Majesty liked that section. It was inevitable that they would compare with each other. Those who were given a copy by His Majesty would be complacent, while those who were not given a copy by His Majesty would be a little anxious. Even those who had been given a copy by His Majesty would still compare the version. It was really a small section, but it wrinkled the ink in the inkstone of many mansions and disturbed the mood of many nobles. Some commoners who stayed in the academy at night curiously asked Miss Gao what was written on the section, and what charm did the words have that could make His Majesty so happy. Since Miss Gao had already opened her mouth, she naturally had to continue. She smiled slightly and kept praising the calligraphy as if it could not be found on earth or heaven. Excuse me. Ning Ke walked out from the back of the study room with a few books under his armpit. When the crowd found him, they immediately stopped talking indifferently according to their usual habit. It was not until he walked out of the study room and into the rain-shielding corridor that they began to talk about the section again. Naturally, no one was willing to point out the flaws of the calligraphy that the emperor loved so much that he could not bear to part with. Furthermore, the calligraphy was truly exquisite. As a result, all the ministers and calligraphers who had seen the original work praised and sighed in accordance with the emperor's wishes. Although Miss Gao's words were slightly exaggerated, none of her classmates expressed any doubts. Jean Wucai knew why Miss Gao had said those words before. She smiled slightly and did not contradict her. Instead, she went along with Miss Gao's words and very sincerely praised the section. Following that, the topic of discussion shifted to the most mysterious and fascinating aspect of this matter. Who was the author of this piece of calligraphy? Who wrote it? Until now, no one knows. I heard that it appeared in the imperial study last spring, and then the palace searched for it for more than half a year. Those great calligraphers were all questioned, but no one admitted it. Do you think that it could be written by those scholars who sell calligraphy in the fragrance workshop? Don't look at me like that. There are many heroes in the wilderness, and talents are always in the mountains. Who says that those scholars who sell calligraphy can't write peerless works? You're right. But if it's the work of those poor calligraphers, why did he secretly send this section to the imperial study? If he could get to the palace, why would he be so poor? This is really a mystery. I don't know why the calligrapher has never stood up to admit it. You know that His Majesty admires him so much, and now he has caused such a disturbance in the court. As long as he is willing to show up, no one will pursue his crime. On the contrary, there must be a lot of wealth waiting for him. Jean Wucai frowned slightly and said after thinking for a moment, I think it's really possible that the calligrapher lives in a small calligraphy and painting shop in the streets of Chang. According to the palace, the calligrapher has never shown up after searching for such a long time. It's very likely that the place where he lives can't hear these rumors. Moreover, the palace must be looking for famous calligraphy and painting shops in Chang'an City, so they can't think of that place for a while. As for why the calligrapher section could enter the imperial study, we don't know. She smiled gently and said a possibility. Maybe a minister in the court cherished that poor calligrapher, so he secretly brought it to the palace and deliberately left it in the imperial study, just to let His Majesty find it. But if it's really so, that minister should have made it clear by now, right? The students felt that what she said was reasonable, so they replied with a smile. If it's really a small shop in a shabby alley, we can also look for it after school. If we can really find that calligrapher, maybe the palace will reward us. Chun Zixin timidly interrupted. I heard that. Ning Ke opened a small calligraphy and painting shop in the eastern city. The students were stunned when they heard this, and then they all laughed out, thinking that this idea was really absurd and ridiculous. A student from Yangwan who was familiar with Zhong Dajuan looked at the disappearing figure of Ning Ke at the end of the rain-shielding corridor and laughed. If the section in the imperial study was written by this guy, then I'm willing to kiss his stinky feet. Laughter sounded in the study room again. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 138. Listening to her classmates making fun of Ning Ke, Sidu Ilan stood up unhappily and pulled Jean Wucai out of the study room. She looked at her seriously and wanted to remind her, But thinking that her companion was gentle and had nothing to do with this matter, she sighed and asked, "Are you going to watch the fun this afternoon?" Jean Wutsai smiled and replied, "You mean Prince Longqing will enter Chang'an City?" "Yes, I have no interest in this kind of man, but I'm a little curious after all," Situ Alan said with a smile. "Then I will go with you. Go to the building of pines and cranes and ask for a room. We should be able to see the long street." Situ Alan looked at her jokingly and said, "Why do you have time today? You don't need to accompany that great scholar. If you really want to see Prince Longqing and don't want to leave Xie Qingyun alone, you might as well take him with you. Prince Longqing will enter the city. Of course he won't go." Jean Wutsai said with a smile, "Young men always have their own pride, not to mention him." Thinking of Ning Kei's experience these days, Situ Ilan said with some disdain, "So what? Should Xie Qingyun be born more proud?" Associate Professor Chao Jifeng went out of the city to welcome the revival of his country. Many students of the academy were discussing whether they should go to Chang and city to watch the fun. Ning Kei, who was walking in the rain-shielding corridor, was full of cultivation and didn't even hear his classmates talking about the calligraphy, let alone think of joining the fun. But thinking that Prince Longqing had caused such a sensation in Chang and city before he arrived, he could not help but feel a little envious and admiring. But there was not too much shock in this kind of envy and admiration. A bigwig of the judicial department of the West Hill Divine Palace, a genius who was about to step into the knowing destiny state, this kind of brilliance might be really shocking to others. However, he had been hanging out with Chun Pippi every day, a guy who had reached the knowing destiny state at the age of 16. He really could not see what was so great about this so-called peerless cultivation genius who was praised by the world. He just had 2 eyes, a nose, and a mouth. It was just that he would make a bigger splash when he jumped into the water because he was too fat and stupid when he first entered Chang, and in the 13th year of the Tianqi era, he met people like Chao Xiaoshu and Qin Pippi. The world before Ning Kei's eyes suddenly widened. His vision was different, so his bearing was naturally different. It was difficult for people like Prince Longqing, who was famous all over the world and shocked the students of the academy, to arouse too much emotion in him. Entering the old library, he saluted the female professor respectfully and read the book of Howren's sword quietly, letting the spring sun gradually tilt and sink outside the west window. When the female professor left at night, the bookshelf gently slid again. Prince Longqing came to Chang'an today, Ning Kei reminded Qin Pippi. Qin Pippi looked confused. He scratched his head and asked, "Who is Prince Longqing?" Ning Kei was surprised and asked, "You don't know Prince Longqing? Why do I have to know a prince?" Qin Pippi sat down with difficulty and took the small flagon that Ning Kei handed to him. He took a sip and said, "Is this person very famous?" "Quite." Ning Kei stared at his eyes and said, "He is the Prince of Yin Kingdom and the number 2 figure in the judicial department of West Hill Divine Palace. He is also regarded as a cultivation genius like you, so there is no reason that you don't know him." "Judicial department?" Qin Pippi shrugged and the fat under his cheeks trembled. He replied indifferently, "So what? There are too many idiots who call themselves geniuses in West Hill. Do I have to know every Tom, Dick, or Harry?" Ning Kei looked at him in confusion and surprise and asked, "Didn't you say that you are the successor of West Hill Divine Palace? Even if you have left West Hill for many years, how can you not even know such a person? That is all your blind guess. When did I admit that I am the successor of West Hill Divine Palace?" Qin Pippi put down the flagon and said angrily, "If you insist on thinking so, then there is only something wrong with your IQ. You are not the successor of West Hill Divine Palace." Ning Kei quickly calmed down and looked at him with a smile. He said, what a pity. I was going to ride on your coattails." Qin Pippi was shocked and asked, "When did you show enough respect to a genius like me so that I can judge that you want to ride on my coattails?" "It was just a joke between friends, so no one took it seriously." Ning Kei suddenly thought of something and asked confusedly, "Speaking of which, the relationship between Tang Empire and West Hill is really bad. In the whole world, only these two have the ability and qualification to beat each other's opponents. It is not wrong to say that we are hidden enemies. In this case, why does the Academy still accept a guy from West Hill Divine Palace? Aren't you worried that West Hill Divine Palace will peep at your secrets? The Academy never recruits students based on their background, but only on their ability and temperament. This is the so-called education without discrimination. The headmaster of Academy even dares to accept a person like me as an ordinary student, not to mention the number 2 figure of the Judicial Department of Divine Hall. Chun Pippi sneered and then changed the topic. He looked at Ning Ke seriously and said, "The Judicial Department of Divine Hall specializes in suppressing heretics. They are extremely powerful and cruel. The people in it are crazy and crazy. They are not easy to deal with. They dare not do anything in Chong, but outside the Tang Empire, there are people who can stop babies from crying at night. Although you don't have to be afraid of them, you'd better not provoke them." Ning Ke saw that he was serious and nodded seriously to show that he remembered. Then he shook his head and sighed. "I heard that the number 1 figure of the Judicial Department of Divine Hall is a woman who is called Tao Addict. People like Prince Longqing are already very difficult to deal with. I really can't imagine how difficult it is to deal with that woman. Not difficult, but very difficult." Hearing the 2 words Tao Addict, Chun Pippi suddenly became excited. He waved his right hand and said, "Yi Hong Yu is a pure lunatic. She is not a Tao Addict. In my eyes, Prince Longqing and the Divine Priest are just some cats and dogs. Even if you offend them, I can still protect you. But if you meet that woman, you must stay away from her, because even I can't wait to hide as far as possible when I meet her." Ning Ke was stunned by his exaggerated reaction. He recalled that Chun Pippi had shown a strange hatred for women in the message he left. He could not help but think that this had something to do with the number 1 figure of the Judicial Department of Divine Hall. He immediately thought of the previous discussion in the study room. All the students said that the beautiful Tao Addict was extremely mysterious, and no one knew her name. However, at this time, Chun Pippi casually said the beautiful Tao Addict's name, and he seemed to be very familiar with it. "You said that you are not the heir of the West Hill Divine Palace." Ning Ke looked at him and said with a faint smile, "Unfortunately, you have exposed yourself. If you still insist on saying that, I will think that there is something wrong with your IQ." Chun Pippi was stunned and then said with a disdainful smile, "Do you want to make a bet? Time is the only criterion to test the truth." Ning Ke said this for the 2nd time since he came to Chang'an. Then he added seriously, "Making a boring bet around the truth is like a cultivator using his unique ability to mix in the gambling house to earn money from ordinary people. They are both very stupid things." Chun Pippi was a little confused by these words. He scratched his head and did not say anything for a long time. Ning Ke suddenly frowned and asked, "Today the study room was very lively about Prince Longqing. I don't understand. Is the knowing destiny state really that great?" "It is certainly very great for a person to enter the knowing destiny state. There are many people who can cultivate, but how many people can enter the knowing destiny state? You can't find many powerhouses in the knowing destiny state in the whole world." Chun Pippi slightly raised his chin and looked very proud, as if he was saying to Ning Ke, "Look at me, look at me, look at me. I'm such a great knowing destiny state master." Ning Ke glanced at him and said with emotion, "So, I'm probably misled by you, a rare knowing destiny state master who has no style of a master." Chun Pippi was furious. He gritted his teeth and scolded, "What do you mean? You mean I don't have the style of a master?" Ning Ke laughed and said, "Not only do you not have the style of a master, but the most important thing is your temperament. Do you understand temperament? It has nothing to do with your fat figure or your boring talk. It is purely a feeling." Chun Pippi said angrily, "State is state. What does it have to do with temperament and temperament? If I can enter the knowing destiny state, then I am in the knowing destiny state. Then I can completely ignore the existence of the upper grade of see-through state. There is no proof." Ning Ke said awkwardly, "You said you're a powerhouse in the knowing destiny state. What proof do you have?" Looking at the evil smile on Chun Pippi's face, Ning Ke was shocked and quickly said, "Don't think about beating me to prove that you are strong. You often say that I am a cultivation idiot. Then what can winning against a cultivation idiot prove? How can you prove it? Chun Pippi innocently spread his hands and asked, You find a master in the upper grade of see-through state, and I will bully him. That's a good suggestion. Ning Ke said with a smile. Do you know Chao Ji-feng, the associate professor of the Department of Etiquette? I heard that he is a psyche master in the see-through state. How about this opponent? Beating the instructor? Chun Pippi stared at him and said, Do you want me to be beaten by second brother and hung on the wall? Ning Ke pretended to think seriously for a moment and said, It is indeed inappropriate to beat the instructor. How about this? Prince Longqing comes to Chang'an. Although he is a bigwig in the judicial department of the West Hill Divine Palace, he is just a nobody in your eyes. Coincidentally, he is only one step away from the Destiny State, so he is suitable to be used as proof. This proof seems to be really good. Chun Pippi frowned and was thinking about how to sneak out of the back mountain without second brother's knowledge and fight with the prince in Chang'an. Suddenly, he understood and stared at Ning Ke with his soybean-sized eyes. He said with hatred, Isn't this a bit wrong? Did you get agitated in the study room and deliberately pick a fight? I have never been a person to pick a fight. Ning Ke's evil intention was directly exposed by him, but there was no shame on his face. He said confidently, You always say that you are a peerless cultivation genius. Now, there is another cultivation genius in Chang and City, and no one knows you at all. On the contrary, everyone admits that Prince Longqing is the real genius. Then how can you be considered peerless? If I were you, how could I swallow it? I don't want you to embarrass him in front of everyone, but at least you should tell the god's favored son that the real genius can only be qualified to call himself at your state. Come on. Chun Pippi glared at him and said, Only now do I believe that the stories you told me before were true. If you hadn't grown up in such a dangerous and filthy environment, how could you have been raised into such a person? You're so young, but your heart is so sinister. Hearing this, Ning Ke laughed and stopped picking a fight. He was really curious about Chun Pippi's state and means. He lowered his voice and suggested, How about you show it? Chun Pippi looked at him as if he was looking at a ghost and said incredulously, Show the ability of the knowing destiny state? Ning Ke, we are cultivators who are respected by the world, not monkeys who perform in the streets and alleys. Of course you're not a monkey, and I'm not a performer who whips monkeys. There's no audience in this old library. How can it be reduced to a performer? Show me your realm, and take it as pointing the way for me. The more Chun Pippi refused to show his state, the more curious Ning Ke was, so he kept persuading him. When he mentioned the words guiding the way, it was precisely Chun Pippi's weakness. To this friend of similar age, Chun Pippi clearly had a much higher realm than the other party, but he had never obtained the corresponding sense of pride. The other party had never shown any expression of shock or admiration. It was only at this moment that he finally seemed to admit defeat. Not in the old library. After thinking for a moment, Chun Pippi explained very seriously, The books upstairs are all transcribed by the Academy's previous masters. Every word is a divine talisman. If I show my knowing destiny state skills in the library, once I cause the divine talisman to backfire, not to mention me, even second brother can't withstand it. Among the 5 states of cultivation, the knowing destiny state was the most mysterious and highest state. Ning Ke knew this from Liu Qingchun on the journey back from the frontier fortress. He was just a beginner in cultivation, and there was a huge gap between him and the knowing destiny state. Just like ants would never envy eagles flying high, he had no interest in the knowing destiny state. Therefore, although he knew there was a young genius in the knowing destiny state beside him, he had never thought of experiencing the magic and mystery of the knowing destiny state. Until today, when he heard that Prince Longqing had come to Chang'an City and that his classmates, who usually ignored him, were excitedly talking about the god's favored one, he, who was still a teenager, began to face those distant realms for the first time. Because of envy, jealousy, and of course, a little bit of resentment. He had no such feelings towards Chun Pippi, who had already entered the knowing destiny state, because Chun Pippi was his friend and had saved his life once. However, He had some conflict and disgust towards the talented young man who had always been superior since he was born, just like the Son of God. Perhaps it was the outburst of the hatred of the grassroots towards the rich. Unfortunately, no matter how he persuaded, Chinpipi still refused to show him the magic skills of the knowing destiny state. As the spring night deepened, he thought that Sang Sang was still waiting for him at home, so he had to go downstairs resentfully. Just as he walked past the edge of the wetland and was about to enter the academy's buildings, he suddenly stopped and stared at the shallow ripples of the water plants under the starlight. Gradually, a strong expression of shock appeared on his face. The wetland of the academy was very shallow and very clear. Walking by the lake in the daytime, one could clearly see countless red carps and black shuttles swimming among the water plants. The fish and the grass were very beautiful. If walking by the lake in the middle of the night, when the starlight was shining, one could even see the scales of the fish reflecting the starlight and twinkling in the wetland, weaving an illusory starry sky that was denser and more beautiful than the night sky. Ninkei went to the old library every day and often left only when the sun was swallowed up by the mountain behind the academy. Therefore, he was very familiar with the wetland and the beautiful pictures of the fish in the pond during the day and night. However, tonight, he suddenly found that the familiar wetland was a little different from usual. The starlight reflected by the weeds in the wetland seemed to be a little dimmer than usual. Ninkei fixed his eyes on it and saw that the koi carps and black shuttles, which were supposed to be swimming happily among the weeds, were suspended in the water for some reason. They were completely motionless and had turned in a fish carved from jade of various colors. Since the fish were motionless, the starlight naturally did not shine anymore. Therefore, the wetland was much more peaceful and dim than usual. What kind of power could make the fish stay motionless among the water plants like stars hanging in the night sky? This kind of stillness was not death or simple solidification. Through the water waves and grass, one could still feel the aura of life, as if these fish had just left a virtual projection in the water, while their bodies had swum to another world that was connected to the real world during this period of time. Was this almost miraculous scene a sign of the state of knowing destiny? After a long time, Ninkei slowly came to his senses. He turned his stiff neck with difficulty and looked at the old library behind him, watching the familiar figure disappearing by the window. With a light snap, a black fish with only a bright red tail happily swam out of the water plants, jumped out of the water, took a bite of the starlight, and then fell back into the pond, completely unaware of what had happened before. When returning to Lin 47th Street, Ninkei still remained silent. The magical scene he had seen in the academy had gone beyond his imagination. Therefore, his mood was extremely complicated at this time. He was shocked and a little confused, but this confusion turned into a faint depression and a strong desire. His mind was preoccupied with those things, so he didn't notice that Lin 47th Street was rather lively today. Wu Lauer, who ran an antique shop next door, was describing some scene to his neighbors under the big pagoda tree. Wu Lauer's fierce wife, for some reason, had changed her temperament today. She didn't stop her husband from gesticulating, but just covered her mouth and giggled at the side, the thick makeup on her face rustling and falling. Tut-tut, it seems that the state of knowing destiny is really amazing. He didn't know how he did it. Why were the fishes so obediently not moving? It looked like a magic trick from a year ago. Those fish lined up like soldiers and moved forward. But the old library is so far away from the wetland. There is no way to perform magic, right? Liu Qingshan once told me that the cultivators of knowing destiny state could essentially grasp the operating rules of the qi of heaven and earth and understand the origin of the world. But isn't the origin of the world particles? It froze those fish, but they were still alive and kicking after they recovered. It looks like a fresh-keeping refrigerator. After entering the shop, he closed the door, sat on the round chair, and kept muttering to himself with his hands resting on his cheeks. After a long while, he suddenly felt that something was wrong. After thinking for a long time, he realized that he did not hear Song Song's voice when he got home today, nor did he drink hot tea immediately. Moreover, if he had said so much in the past, the girl would have started to mutter that the young master had started to talk nonsense again, but she did not do so today. Ning Ke looked up in surprise and found that Sang Sang was sitting at the desk, staring at a point in the sky and giggling. Her hair was a little disheveled, and she looked like the legendary silly girl. Are you bewitched?" Hearing this, Sang Sang suddenly woke up and stood up in a panic. She looked at him and said, "Young master, when did you come back?" Ning Ke said angrily, "Young master, I've been back for an hour. It doesn't matter if I'm ignored by those ignorant kids in the academy, but do I have to enjoy this kind of treatment at home?" Sang Sang's dark face showed shame, and she hurried to pour tea for him. Ning Ke suddenly thought of the hot topic in the academy today. He raised his eyebrows and looked at the back of the little handmaiden. After a moment of hesitation, he asked, "Did you also go to watch the fun today?" Sang Sang poured half of the tea that had been brewed and then poured hot water into it. She brought it to her lips and gently dipped it in the hot water. After finding that the tea was warm to Ning Ke's taste, she brought it to him and said shyly, "During the day, there was no business anyway, and sister-in-law Wu kept asking me to watch, so I went to have a look." Ning Ke gasped and looked at her little face incredulously. He thought that Prince Longqing was so charming that even Sang Sang, a 12-year-old handmaiden, was bewitched like this. Sang Sang misunderstood his look and hurriedly rearranged her fluffy hair. She seriously explained, "Prince Longqing's carriage did not take the Vermilion Bird Avenue, but the Tongnan Avenue. The street was narrow and there were many people, so it was too crowded and my hair was squeezed. But young master, don't worry, I didn't bring any silver when I went there, so I am not afraid of being stolen." "Is that what I am worried about?" Ning Ke angrily reprimanded. "Then what are you worried about, young master?" Sang Sang opened her willowy eyes and asked curiously. Ning Ke touched his head and wondered what he was worried about and angry about. After thinking for a while, he still could not figure it out, so he did not bother to think about it anymore. He looked up and down at the little girl and teased, "I didn't expect that there would be a day when my Sang Sang would be smitten. But let me tell you some bad news. That prince has a fiancée." Sang Sang stared at him and said, "Young master, didn't you say that I can't get married until I'm 16? I'm only 13 and a half now. How could I think about getting married? If you ask me, you won't even mature at 16. Ning Ke raised his hand and poked her smooth little forehead. He said, "Look at your idiotic look just now. You're only 13 and a half years old, and you're already thinking about love. Don't you feel ashamed?" "I just followed Aunt Wu to watch the fun." Sang Sang slightly lowered her head and explained in a low voice with some lack of confidence. "Prince Longqing is really good-looking. I can't think of a suitable chapter name, so it is untitled, to be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for it. Your support is my biggest motivation." Chapter 139. Ning Ke remembered that little Sang Sang had also stared at the CF family head in a daze when the results of the Academy's entrance exam were released last year. Only then did he realize that this girl was just like him, a mortal who valued appearance above all else. But why had she never stared at him in a daze? That was naturally because his appearance was too ordinary. Thinking of this, he looked at her and said gloomily, "Men who are too good-looking are usually not smart, such as that Prince Longqing." Sang Sang rested her little black face on her slender arms and said absent-mindedly, "Young master, I just want to see how his face is made and why it is so good-looking. I don't know which cosmetics brand he uses, Chinjinji Cosmetic Store or Yuzuan Cosmetic Store. Alas, it would be great if I could have a chance to see him up close, and it would be even better if I could touch his eyebrows." Ning Ke looked at her absent-minded look and suddenly realized that his little handmaiden seemed to have no hobbies or pleasures over these years, except for running the household chores. He felt a burst of pity in his heart. After a moment of silence, he said with a smile, "Prince Longqing will enter the second floor of the academy. If you want to see him up close, I can take you there and you can cheer for me on the way." "Great, great." Sang Sang clapped her little hands and sat up straight. Then she looked at Ning Ke's face and very seriously corrected him. "But I will definitely go there to cheer for you that day, young master, and just to see him on the way." That's more like it, good girl. Ning Ke smiled and rubbed her head. Then he walked to the back of the house with his hands clasped behind his back, thinking that no matter for his own life or for the little handmaiden's dream, he had to climb to the second floor. Another spring came. Willow catkins flew all over the sky, drifting over the market wells, the quiet and secluded residences in Southern City, the lively vermilion bird avenue, and the high vermilion palace walls. They naughtily twitched on the tips of the beast noses on the eaves, and then gently fell to the ground, sticking the wet ground of the laundry office into a thin piece of felt. I was wrong, I was really wrong. If I had been a little more courageous when His Majesty asked me last year and agreed directly, I wouldn't be so hesitant now. I'm looking at a mountain of treasures, but I don't dare to reach out to touch it. The rich Hebei accent reverberated in the sky, full of willow catkins. The slightly plump deputy commander of the Tang Imperial Guards, Su Chongshan, stood under the railing of the side hall with his hands tucked in his sleeves. He looked at the officials who walked out of the imperial study with joy and pride on their faces. He looked at the copies in their hands as if they were treasures. The disdain and contempt in his eyes gradually turned into bitterness and regret, as if he missed his first love in his hometown. Tell me, why does an uncouth fellow have to learn from those ministers and play tricks? Now, he had screwed up, hadn't he? He hurt his insteps so much. Now, the more His Majesty likes it, the more trouble it will cause, and the more I dare not to admit that I lied to His Majesty at that time. This is really a big mistake. The little eunuch Lu Ji raised his head and glanced at the commander's expression. He lowered his voice and suggested, "Sir, we have been watching for several months. No matter how well Ning Ke hid it, the imperial court will dig it out one day. At that time, not only will we be punished for lying to the emperor, but our bodyguard office will also not get any benefits. Why don't we just take a gamble?" "What gamble?" Su Chongshan snorted coldly and said, "His Majesty likes it. Her Majesty likes it. And I don't know whether those ministers really like it or not. But anyway, His Majesty has been disappointed for so long. When he finally finds out that we have been hiding it from him for so long, all his disappointment and liking will turn into anger towards you and me. At that time, Ning Ke won't have any trouble, but you or me will bear the responsibility." When it came to serious business, the deputy commander's Hebei accent became much lighter. He did not say air, but I. Lu Ji did not dare to answer. He rolled his eyes and thought, if there really comes a day, I, a little eunuch, will be the one to take the blame. This matter, I have to find a way to break out of this situation. Lu Ji, who do you think His Majesty trusts the most in the palace besides Her Majesty? Su Chongshan suddenly said. Lu Ji was shocked and understood that the deputy commander had seen through his thoughts. He bowed with a sad face and thought for a long time before he tentatively said, "The Master of Nation, I don't care what you do about this matter, but you have to do it properly. Through the Master of Nation, let His Majesty know who wrote that calligraphy is, but you have to get the bodyguard office out of this matter." Su Chongshan said lightly, and then walked towards the palace gate. Lu Ji had taken over such a hot potato. How could he just watch his lord leave without getting involved? With an anxious face, he followed up and said in a low voice, "Lord Commander, it's easy to talk about it, but how are we going to pick it? If I knew how to get rid of it, why would I let you think about it?" Su Chongshan looked back and glared at him. He said angrily, "I'm busy with official business every day. How can I have time to do these little things? It's not some magic weapon or talisman. It's just a piece of lousy calligraphy. How could it make such a big noise? That Prince Longqing is also a trouble. He even needs me to send troops to Peach Alley to suppress him. He's just a lousy and beautiful young man. Why are all the girls in Chang'an crazy?" The commander flicked his sleeves and left. He faintly heard his complaining voice among the catkins. "The world is so messy." The peach blossoms in Peach Alley in Chang'an and had not yet bloomed. The peach blossoms outside the Jingyuan Cemetery in the suburbs of the city had just borne numerous pink buds. The Jingyuan Cemetery was located among the green forests and secluded mountains. Those who were qualified to be buried here were basically officials of the Tang Empire or wealthy businessmen and celebrities. It was the season to go hiking and sweep graves. The cemetery was surrounded by smoke that could not be blown away by the wind. The ashes of paper money that were still warm were piled up in front of the fire screen at the edge of the forest. A tall and thin middle-aged man in a gray robe stood on the top of the cemetery and looked down quietly. He waited for the people in front of the stone grave to leave before he slowly walked down. Looking at the glorious resume of Zhang Yiqi, the censor of the Tang Empire, on the tombstone, the middle-aged man in a gray robe was silent for a moment. Then he walked to the side of the grave and slowly stroked the freshly pulled grass with his right hand. The surface of his palm was very close to the fresh grass and stubble, but did not completely touch. The tall and thin middle-aged man in a gray robe was Lin Ling, a master in the northeast border military of the Tang Empire. He was a psyche master in the see-through state. He arrived in Chang, and at the beginning of last winter, and began to secretly investigate the death of Zhang Yiqi and others. In the past 6 months, he had read many files about the 3 murder cases through his acquaintances in the military ministry. He had gone to the blacksmith workshop in the east of the city and the small building by the lake in the south of the city several times. As for the Jinyuan Cemetery, this was the 4th time he had come. There were some doubtful points in the files about the last 2 murder cases. The most doubtful point was that the real murderer had not been caught. However, this master of the border military did not find any connection between the 2 files. Moreover, he was secretly investigating under the order of General Xiaohou. Before he found conclusive evidence, it was inconvenient for him to communicate with the relevant departments of the imperial court. Naturally, there was no way for him to get help from those departments, such as the Chang and local government. As for the file about the death of censor Zhang Yiqi, he had read it many times. However, he did not find any problem at all. It seemed that an old censor who was afraid of his wife had a traffic accident when he ran out of the brothel in a hurry. He did not know that because the censor's wife did not let go of the House of Red Sleeves in the beginning, the Chang and local government had made a very solid record of this file. Not to mention him, even if the imperial court sent professionals to read it, they could not find any problem in the file. If it was an ordinary person, he might directly leave Chang and return to the northeast border military camp to submit his own judgment after several months without finding anything strange. However, Lin Ling was not only a master in the see-through state, but also a soldier of the Tang Empire. Before he was completely sure, he had enough perseverance and patience to persist. Moreover, he knew better than anyone else that General Xiaohou and military counselor Gu, she would never accept any ambiguous conclusion. Before he left, military counselor Gu Shi had told him that the death of censor Zhang Yiqi was the most critical of the 3 murder cases in Chang and city. The general did not need him to find out whether there was any connection between the 3 murder cases. He only needed him to confirm whether censor Zhang Yiqi really died in a traffic accident, and there was no other doubt. The suburbs of Chang and city, the tombs of the dignitaries. Lin Ling quietly looked at the tombs in front of him and slowly frowned. He sighed in a voice so low that it was almost inaudible. Since we can't ask the Chang and local government to open the coffin and examine the corpse, and we can't open the tomb by ourselves at the risk of the imperial court's investigation and anger, then how can we find out whether the censor died in the coffin or not? Although he found nothing and seemed to be in a dilemma, he still did not choose to leave. Instead, his face gradually revealed a determined expression. He took a few steps back, lifted the front lapel of his green robe, and sat on the ground. What he was going to do next would cause great damage to his cultivation, and it was similar to looking for a small stone in the haystack. What was more troublesome was that he did not know whether the small stone was in the haystack or not. But he still decided to do so, because only by doing this could he convince himself to leave Chang and city. In this way, the powerhouse in the see-through realm from the northeast border military of the Tang Empire sat down among the tombs. He let the willow catkins gently fall on his lapel and let the new green peach buds look at him mockingly on the branches. He sat there from morning to afternoon. His shadow became slanted and shrank, and his face became paler and paler. After an unknown period of time, Lin Ling slowly opened her eyes and looked at the tomb of the censor not far in front of her. Her face revealed an extremely shocked expression, but her eyes were filled with doubt and some relief. It was as if she had confirmed something, confirmed a certain speculation, and felt relieved. He raised his sleeves and gently wiped the sweat that was about to drip down from his eyebrows. He struggled to stand up, held his tired waist, took a deep breath of the air mixed with the smell of smoke over the tombs, and slowly walked towards Chang and city. The next day, the tranquility of the tomb of the censor Zhang Yiqi was disturbed again. The person who came was not the fierce wife who cried yesterday, nor the plump concubines who cried but had no tears, but Lin Ling and several runners of the Chang and local government. Today, Lin Ling did not wear the green casual clothes, but the military uniform of the Tang army, which made him look particularly neat and strong. He turned around and bowed to the runners of the Chang and local government and said softly, "Your Honor, since I am willing to use my head as a guarantee, may I ask when we will open the coffin?" The runners separated, and the prefectural magistrate of Chang and city, Shangguan Yangyu, frowned and walked out. The person is on the journey, updated regularly, to be continued. If you like this work, you're welcome to vote for it and vote monthly. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 140. Because of the frown, Shangguan Yangyu's triangular eyes looked even uglier. He gently stroked the sparse beard on his chin and looked at Lin Ling with disgust. Although you have taken the document to return to the capital from a military ministry, and the Imperial Center administration has also proved your identity, so I will not punish you for leaving the military camp without permission, but you should know that this case has been closed for many days. What kind of argument is it to open the coffin and re-examine it because of your groundless words? Hearing this, Lin Ling knew that the conversation between them in the Chang and local government was not smooth, let alone pleasant. After a short silence, Lin Ling said softly, "Prefectural magistrate, if the Chang and local government insists on not opening the coffin and re-examining it, I have to ask the military ministry for help." "Are you using the military ministry to threaten me?" Shangguan Yangyu had never been a man of iron bones. But now that he had the opportunity to sit in the position of the head of the Chang and local government, he was not willing to lose face in front of his subordinates. He sneered and reminded, "The censor is buried in the tomb. Even if there is a change in the case, it is still a problem for the security of the capital. If I don't say anything, even the military ministry has no reason to intervene. Do you want me to go to court with your general?" Lin Ling thought of the military counselor's advice before he left and looked at the prefectural magistrate of Chang. He suddenly understood something and said with a smile, "Sir, I just found some doubts, so I told the Chang and local government. I think since you are willing to come to the cemetery, you must have some intentions. But I don't know what you need me to pay attention to. Please tell me directly." Shangguan Yangyu looked a little better. He stroked his beard and thought for a moment. Then he said expressionlessly, "There are doubts in any case, no matter if it's the censor or the common people. I'm in charge of the Chang and city's officials and people on behalf of His Majesty. Of course, I have to make a serious judgment. But you have to know that this has nothing to do with the military ministry or General Xiaohou." Lin Ling understood the hidden meaning in the prefectural magistrate's words. After thinking for a while, he lowered his voice and asked, "I have other business to attend to, but I accidentally found something wrong with the censor's remains in the tomb?" "That's right." Shangguan Yangyu glanced at him indifferently and said, "And you must remember that no matter what the result of opening the coffin is, before we find the real suspect, we can only investigate in secret. Especially, we can't let the lady in the censor's mansion know about it." A subordinate heard this and said awkwardly, "Darren, if you want to open the coffin and examine the corpse, you have to inform the censor's mansion. Otherwise, if there's a lawsuit in the future, it will be very difficult for us to be on the side of reason." Shangguan Yangyu listened to his subordinate's advice and didn't answer. He just looked at Lin Ling quietly. The meaning of this behavior was very clear. She didn't ask the victim's family and open the coffin, so she had to take the blame. Since he couldn't use the name of the military ministry and General Xiaohou, he would have to take the blame if there was any disagreement afterwards. A bitter smile appeared on Lin Ling's face. He thought that the officials in Chang and City, whether it was the scribe he dealt with a few days ago or the prefectural magistrate who came in person today, were all so slippery. If it was another situation, Lin Ling would definitely not be willing to take the blame. Without the protection of the military ministry and General Xiaohou, even if he was a psyche master in the see-through realm, it would be a little troublesome to face the anger of the censor's mansion. However, the general had ordered him to do so, and he was very sure that there was something wrong with the remains in the tomb. So after a moment of silence and consideration, he looked at Shangwan Yangyu and nodded heavily, saying, "As you wish, Darren." "Very good." Shangwan Yangyu looked calm, but he began to feel anxious deep inside. Since this psyche master from the Northeast Border Army dared to take such a big blame, it meant that he was very confident about the situation in the tomb. In this way, it seemed that there was really some conspiracy behind the death of Censor Zhang Yiqi. The works official, Huzhua, was waiting beside the censor's tomb with all kinds of tools. When the spring sun was in the middle of the sky and the yang qi was the strongest, with a shout, the workers transferred from the cemetery, under the command of the works official of the Chang and local government, turned the tomb that was cleaned by the family yesterday into a messy construction site. The tomb was open from the back, and a black coffin lay quietly in the slightly damp tomb. The workers put a wooden plank on top of the tomb and tied 7 ropes to it. After shouting for a long time, they finally hoisted the heavy coffin up. As the coffin was opened, Shangwan Yangyu quickly covered his nose with a handkerchief. After a while, he found that he didn't smell any stench. He frowned and looked inside through the crowd. He saw that the coroner was half bent over and attentively examining the body. He could vaguely see some bones or funerary objects. After a while, the coroner walked out of the crowd and bowed respectfully to Shangwan Yangyu. He took off the oiled mask covering his mouth and nose, and his voice was accompanied by the strong smell of peppermint oil. "Your Honor, I didn't find anything suspicious." Shangwan Yangyu heard this and looked at Lin Ling, who was silent beside him. There was no anger or disappointment in his eyes after being flirted with. There was only questioning because he knew that things were definitely not so simple. Lin Ling looked at the coroner and asked, "Did you check the censor's head?" Of course, the coroner didn't know his identity, so he answered very impolitely. After a long silence, Lin Ling looked at Shangwan Yangyu and said, "There was a hard object in the censor's skull. Now I'm not sure if it was an iron nail or some other weapon." Shangwan Yangyu looked at him and sneered. He thought that his subordinates would never be greedy for this first credit. As long as it was delayed for a while, Lin Ling couldn't hold it anymore. He said indifferently with a slight mockery, "I heard that a psyche master using psyche power to check the remains of the dead is an extremely inauspicious and taboo thing. I can understand that you have been silent before." Lin Ling's face was slightly pale. He laughed bitterly and said, "In order to maintain the dignity of the law of the Tang Empire and redress the grievances of the officials of the empire, some rules can only be ignored at this critical moment." "Well said." Shangwan Yangyu raised his chin slightly and said indifferently, "So if there is anything else, you'd better tell us in advance. Don't let my people waste time and energy." Lin Ling calmly agreed and no longer tried to cover up. He directly led Shangwan Yangyu and the coroner to the side of the black coffin. He raised his arm and pointed at the head of the corpse covered by the cloth. He said, "It should be shrunk into the scalp, so it can't be seen with the naked eye. You can find the problem if you remove all the fur and scalp." The government coroner opened the coffin and examined the corpse. He also paid attention to the dead and rarely disemboweled, not to mention that the one lying in the coffin was the censor of the Tang Empire. Hearing that he was going to peel off his scalp, the coroner couldn't help but look at the prefectural magistrate awkwardly. He rubbed his hands and asked, "Your Excellency, do it." Shangwan Yangyu said indifferently, "If you can't find any problem, someone will naturally take the initiative to apologize to the imperial court. The anger of the censor's mansion will never fall on a nobody like you." Lin Ling silently stood beside the coffin and shook his head with a bitter smile. He thought that this person didn't forget to emphasize it at this time. He didn't look like the prefectural magistrate of Chang and city, but more like a vulgar village official. At this time, the officials and runners of Chang and local government all surrounded the coffin and drove away the curious cemetery workers. They looked at Qian's action and couldn't help but wonder what was under the scalp. The censor's corpse in the coffin had long been rotten. The cloth that tied his hair was lost, and the scattered and withered hair stuck to his scalp. Qian's would carefully remove the hair and the mud-like scalp below. Then he splashed water on the yellowish-white skull and wiped it several times with a piece of cloth. A very small wound appeared on the top of the skull. It was unknown whether it was dirty blood or congealed rotten flesh. As the cloth was wiped and the water was washed, it became clearer and clearer until the thing in the wound could be seen. The officials and runners around the coffin all held their breath. Shangwan Yangyu frowned more and more. As the coroner moved the sharp tongs in his hand, everyone's body became more and more nervous and stiff. Like a rusty knife being pulled out of a bone, a shrill and horrifying sound came from inside the coffin. The coroner's forehead was covered with sweat. One of his hands was pressed against the corpse's skull to prevent it from being torn off, while the other hand slowly exerted force. Finally, he pulled out the hard object hidden in the imperial censor's skull. It was a very long iron nail. It was unknown whether it had been soaked in blood or corpse water for too long. The iron nail was covered with rust, but the front end was still extremely sharp. Looking at the iron nail in Yuan Shizue's hand, the people around the coffin all sucked in a breath of cold air. It was as if they could see the horrifying scene of a cold iron nail being hammered into the head of an imperial censor on a certain day last year. They couldn't help but shake their heads in shock and horror. Some people even subconsciously shrank their necks. Lin Ling stood next to the coroner in silence, because among all the people present, only he could basically know what he would see at this moment. He looked at the prefectural magistrate of Chang, and who had an extremely ugly expression, and said calmly, "Your Excellency, the suspicious point has been revealed. The following investigation is the matter of Chang and local government. I will no longer participate in it." Shangwan Yangyu stared at the rusty nail for a long time and suddenly raised his head to look at the person. He said coldly, "Of course, I don't need you to participate in the investigation, but I have to remind you that I will report what should be reported to the Ministry of Penalty and what should be reported to His Majesty. But if I hear some words outside before I find out the real murderer, don't blame me for involving the general." Lin Ling cupped her hands in acknowledgement and then left the cemetery. Ninkei didn't know that the censor Zhang Yiqi's tomb had been reopened and the Chang and local government re-examined the body. The iron nail he had driven into Zhang Yiqi's skull had been found, so he didn't know that he had just embarked on the road of revenge for less than a year, and a thick haze had already covered his future. He felt that his future was extremely bright because the second floor of the academy would be opened in 2 days, and it was also the time when he was determined to fight. On this day, in order to cheer for Xie Qingyun and the other 6 students of the course of magic skills to enter the second floor, the students of the academy went to a banquet in a noble restaurant. Among them was him, who was forcibly dragged there by Situ Lan. Salem's Armed Storm is open again in the Qidian game channel. There's a heroic spirit system in it after level 32. Something Fishy is one of the heroic spirit guardians. Those who are interested can go and play it. P.S. Something fishy in reality, that is, I arrived in Shaman yesterday to deal with some private affairs, and then fell ill. I was very uncomfortable, so I didn't pretend to be pitiful and sad. I just struggled to write it, because I was worried that it would be too lousy. If it was really lousy, I would go back and revise it. But now I can't change it, because I'm already so uncomfortable that I don't even know whether what I wrote is lousy or not. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Qidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 141. The second floor of the academy would be opened before the headmaster, who traveled abroad, returned. It was unknown where the news came from, but according to the instructor's replies, it could be basically confirmed that it was true, and the date was the day after tomorrow. Everyone knew that it was difficult to enter the second floor of the academy, as difficult as ascending to heaven. The students knew that they probably wouldn't encounter Hao Ian's blessing. The students who could enter the second floor should be Xie Qingyun and the other 5 arcane science students. Therefore, after school, some people began to make a ruckus to cheer for the 6 of them. This matter had nothing to do with Ning Quebec. As a classmate forgotten by the academy and a nobody marginalized by the students, no one could think that his whole mind was also on the second floor. After the bell was dismissed, he wanted to go to the old library to ask Professor Yu or Chin Pippi. He wanted to know if it was possible for him to enter the second floor with his current state. Unexpectedly, he was dragged out of the academy by Situ Alan before he left. In Miss Situ's words, no matter how unsociable you were, you still had to participate in such group activities. Even if you were excluded by your classmates, if you often appeared and did not wander in the woods and meadows like a lonely ghost as usual, then there would be a day when the resentment of that day would be resolved peacefully. Ning Ke did not think that he needed to strive to squeeze into the circle of the academy's classmates and exchange this attitude for some kind of gentle environment around him. However, Situ Alan was usually very kind to him, so it was a little embarrassing. After thinking for a moment, he also left the academy and entered Chang and city with the students. The gathering place chosen by the students of the academy was in the south of the city, which was a restaurant converted from a noble mansion by the lake. There was a plaque hanging on the restaurant, on which was the name written by the libationer himself, Victory House. Victory House was the first noble restaurant in Chang and city, covering a large area with extremely exquisite and luxurious decorations. The guests were either ministers of the imperial court or rich people from the 4 cities. If it were not for the academy's reputation, it would be extremely difficult to even book a heavenly dining platform outside the mansion. Now it was spring, and the grass was long. The old pearwood outside the mansion was hung with layers of gauze, which danced in the spring breeze. The scene was extremely beautiful. More than 100 young male and female students smiled against the railing, chuckled around the lake, or lifted the gauze to walk, which suddenly turned this place into a wonderful place for youth and singing. Ning Ke stood in an inconspicuous corner, holding a small teapot in his hand, calmly watching his classmates who were playing in the spring breeze. Thinking that he probably would not see any enthusiastic faces at the banquet later, he still sat in the corner in a daze. He estimated that he would leave in advance in the middle of the banquet, so he called the manservant of the Victory House and gave him some money, asking him to hire someone to send a message to Lin 47th Street and let Sang Sang bring the carriage to wait outside the door. After a long time, the students who were in the limelight chose the most elegant and unrestrained table by the railing, and the students who were in the heat of love looked at a secluded place in the bamboo forest behind the curtain. Only then did the large balcony by the lake gradually quiet down. Situ Elon deserved to be the little leader of the female army in Chang'an. She stood up and said a few words in a natural and unrestrained manner, nothing more than wishing the 6 students of the course of magic skills to achieve good results the day after tomorrow, and wishing all the classmates to make progress in their studies and so on. As soon as she finished speaking, all kinds of fruits and exquisite food were served like flowing water. The students began to drink and have fun. In the most lively place, they could clearly hear the students' earnest expectations and light flattery to Xie Qingyun and other 5 people. I heard that the second floor only recruits 1 person this time. Linchuan Wangying still looked childish. Looking at those big brothers and sisters around her, she then turned to the side and timidly asked, "Was it the same rule before?" Xie Qingyun smiled and looked at the classmates around him. He calmly replied, "The rule of the second floor is different every time it opens. It is possible to recruit only 1 person this time. It is quite difficult, so I will try my best to live up to the expectations of my classmates and the teacher's painstaking teaching." Zhong Dajuan opened the folding fan with a snap and said with a loud laugh, "Qingyun, you have now entered the no-doubt state. Even Professor Chow calls you the first person in the course of magic skills and thinks that you have a great chance to enter the second floor. If even you have no confidence, then who else can enter the second floor this year?" Thinking of this, Linchuan Wangying could not help but look a little gloomy. Immediately, his youthful face showed undisguised envy to Xie Qingyun and said, "Brother Xie, when you enter the second floor in the future, you must remember to tell everyone what it is like inside. I'm really curious." Xie Qingyun gently smiled and patted the teenager's shoulder, saying, "You are still young. Even if you can't enter the second floor this time, you'll enter it next time. You don't need me to inquire about it for you." At this moment, there came a rush of hooves outside the Victory House. The students at the lakeside banquet did not care about it. Every day in Chong and City, they could see several groups of cavalries galloping. Only Ning Kei, who sat quietly in the corner, looked up at the source of the hooves, because he could tell that these cavalries were not the Yulin Royal Guards, but the frontier army who had really seen blood on the battlefield. A moment later, a young general dressed in military attire walked up to the lakeside terrace under the lead of a few subordinates. He looked at these students drinking and having fun in the spring breeze. His brows couldn't help but furrow slightly. He directly lifted the veil curtain and charged into the even more quiet and secluded depths of the courtyard. Several Tang soldiers carried a smell of iron and blood, which was very different from the relaxed atmosphere on the lakeside terrace. When they appeared, the voices of the academy students subconsciously lowered. These officers were dressed in military uniforms and light armors. They strode forward, looking extremely valiant. They even caused a few tables to tilt, which made the students of the academy a little unhappy. The Tangs valued military achievements and most loved and admired the frontier army, who bathed in blood and guarded the gate of the country. On ordinary occasions, even the ministers of the court would only smile and not care about the slightly reckless actions of these officers. However, the academy students at the lakeside gathering today were extremely young and more or less had some arrogance in their bones. Some students could not bear the anger in their heart and sneered at the backs of those officers. Even if Susher came here in person, he would not dare to be disrespectful to our academy. These officers really don't know how powerful I am. Susher was the Defender General of the Tang State, and undoubtedly the first person in the imperial military. But in the eyes of these proud academy students, he did not seem particularly powerful. The Tang officers who were walking forward suddenly stopped when they heard this. The leading young general turned his head and looked at the academy students around with slightly cold eyes. After a moment of silence, the young general said, faintly and mockingly, "So you are the academy students. You don't go hunting in the mountains in spring, but go sightseeing in the city. You are really getting worse with each generation." The students of the academy on the terrace could not stand it anymore. They all stood up and wanted to talk to the young general. Unexpectedly, the young general did not back down and continued to say with a frosty face, "When I was studying in the academy, proud people always had to have the ability to be proud. Now you little guys have only learned a little and you're already talking big." Hearing this, the students realized that this young general was actually the senior brother of the academy. They could not help but feel a little awkward and did not know what to say. The young general refused to let them go and reprimanded them coldly. Even if General Susher came here in person, he would not dare to be disrespectful to our academy. These words are indeed not wrong, but all of you must remember one thing. What great General Su respects is the dean. He respects the instructors, and not you bunch of trash. From now on, keep your mouth shut when you are outside. If I hear any academy students talk big outside, don't blame me for beating you up according to the academy rules. The first lesson of the academy was about etiquette. Etiquette was the rule. The rule of the academy was that whoever had the bigger fist in seniority was the one in the right. This was the teaching that the students had long remembered. At this time, when they heard that the senior of the academy was going to use the academy rules, naturally, no one dared to speak carelessly. Situ Ilan lifted the veil and looked at the situation here. She could not help but laugh out loud. She looked at the young general and said, "Second brother Hua, you are the senior captain of the Gushan Commandery. Why do you have to be angry at your junior brothers and sisters?" Hearing this, the students looked at the young general with even more different eyes. The senior captain of the Gushan Commandery, Hua Shanyue, was a star figure in the young generation of the Tang military. No wonder he was so powerful before. Hua Shanhua looked at Situ Ilan, who came out from behind the veil, and sighed helplessly. He shook his head and said, I forgot that you are now also studying in the academy. I have something urgent to do today. I will go to pay my respects to the general tomorrow night. Situ Ilan glanced at the most secluded backyard of the Victory House and guessed who he was going to see after hurrying back from the Gushan commandery. She smiled and said, I'll go in to pay my respects later. It's no problem for you to go. Hua Shanhua glanced at the academy's students around and suddenly saw a somewhat familiar face in the corner. He was slightly startled, but did not say anything. He continued with a smile, It's okay to bring Wu Tsai, but other irrelevant people should not be brought in. Here are all the outstanding talents of the academy. Situ Ilan said with a smile and reminded him without a trace. Hua Shanhua smiled gratefully and understood what she wanted to say. He raised his fist to salute and hurried away. When they were drunk, the lively place became livelier and the desolate place became more desolate. Situ Ilan used some method to avoid the eyes of her classmates and quietly went to the most inconspicuous corner behind the veil. She looked at Ning Ke, who was half of his body, looking for frogs, and frowned. She said, Why don't you want to talk more with them? Their faces are disgusting and their words are boring. Ning Ke looked at the water reptiles on the moss of the lake and sighed regretfully. He turned his head to look at her and said, This is probably how they see me. If that's the case, why should I go over and affect their appetite? Situ Ilan looked at him seriously and said, These months you have been wandering like a lonely ghost. I really don't understand. Don't you want to clear your name and tell the whole academy that you didn't avoid the battle in the semester exam? The semester exam bet is really a very boring thing. Of course, I'm not used to being wronged. But since I've been wronged, it will be too weak to go to the fun and harmonious. It will be disgusting. Ning Ke said with a smile, I will clear my name. Situ Ilan asked when. Ning Ke thought for a while and then answered with some uncertainty, Maybe the day after tomorrow. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 142. When the second floor opened and everyone was silent, you suddenly stood up and said with a smile, I can. Situ Ilan looked at him and shook her head with a smile. She sighed and said, The picture is beautiful and the story is wonderful. But it's a pity that you and I are both poor people who can't cultivate. I can. Ning Ke thought that the girl by the railing would not believe him even if he said it. He smiled gently and changed the topic. He looked at the lively place on the other side of the veil and said slowly, If the second floor only recruits one person this time, then I don't understand why they are so happy. Situ Ilan said with a smile, Because Mr. Xie is much more popular than you. Even if someone is jealous of him, they won't show it on their faces. Instead, they will cheer for him like Zhong Dajuan. Ning Ke was silent for a moment and suddenly said with a smile, Have you all forgotten someone? Situ Ilan was stunned and then immediately understood what he meant. She was shocked speechless. All the students of the academy, including her, had forgotten Prince Longqing from the Yin Kingdom. Maybe it was because in their minds, Prince Longqing was a bigwig in the judicial department of the West Hill Divine Palace and a peerless cultivation genius. So they subconsciously put him in a higher position and never thought of comparing him with themselves. Moreover, the god's favored son, who had aroused the desire of thousands of girls when he entered Chang and City, had been living in Peach Alley these days. He even found an excuse not to attend the palace banquets. He was really low-key to the extreme. Everyone knows that Prince Longqing came to Chang and City to replace the crown prince of Yin as a hostage. But no matter his identity as a prince or the inviolable dignity of the West Hill Divine Palace, he needs another justifiable reason. So the rumor that he wants to enter the second floor of the academy for further study may not be just a rumor. Ning Ke looked at her and continued, If the second floor of the academy really only recruits one student this time, and if Prince Longqing really wants to enter the second floor, then in your opinion, who is qualified to be his opponent, Xie Qingyun or Lin Chuan Wang Ying? Mr. Xie is indeed talented, but how can he be compared with Prince Longqing? And Wang Ying is still young. Situ Elon gradually digested the shock in her heart and suddenly thought of a possibility. She asked, "Is it possible that Prince Longqing doesn't occupy the quota of entering the building?" Ning Ke shook his head and said, "If he occupies the quota, what will these happy guys do?" He smiled and pretended to comfort her. "But I think Xie Qingyun will not be discouraged, even if he knows that he has to compete with Prince Longqing for the only place. On the contrary, he may be inspired to fight more strongly." Situ Elon shook her head and said, "Prince Longqing is one step away from the knowing destiny state, while Mr. Xie has just entered the no-doubt state. The difference between their states is too great, and the fighting won't play a big role." Looking at those classmates who were drinking happily on the terrace, and thinking of the scene when the second floor opened the day after tomorrow, when Prince Longqing would come and embarrass the academy students, she said gloomily, "Although Mr. Xie comes from the South Jin Kingdom and is not a citizen of Tang, he has studied in the academy for a year after all. We Tangs can accept it if he can enter the second floor. But if Prince Longqing surpasses all the students and becomes the only one to enter the second floor, it's hard to imagine how angry and disappointed the elders in the imperial court will be with our students." Prince Longqing came from a Yin kingdom and was a hostage. However, he was a bigwig of the judicial department of the West Hill Divine Palace and an enemy of the Tang Empire. If such a person directly suppressed the young generation of the Tang Empire in Chang and city with his powerful strength, it would be like a slap in the face of the Tang Empire. I don't understand why the Academy made such a rule this time. Situ Elon frowned and looked at the anxious fish swimming in the lake. She said, "Isn't it deliberately creating a scene for Prince Longqing to look down on all the mountains?" Ning Ke smiled and comforted her. "It hasn't started yet, and we don't know how to enter the second floor of the academy. How can you predict in advance that the only person who can enter the second floor is Prince Longqing? The West Hill Divine Palace is the enemy of the Tang Empire. Even from a standpoint of the enemy, I have to admit that Prince Longqing is absolutely the best person in the young generation in the world, and it's hard to find an opponent." Situ Elon said in a low mood, "It's not shameful to admit the strength of the enemy. What really bothers me is that the Tang Empire has always been full of talents, but we can't find a person who can compete with him in our generation." "Who said there isn't?" Ning Ke said with a smile. Situ Elon looked at him with a smile and said, "If you want to talk about yourself, it's really not convincing." "All right." Ning Ke sighed and spread out his arms. He said, "You don't have to worry about these things. It's just a matter of face. Even if Prince Longqing's strong body can shock all the heroes and women, the Yin Kingdom will still pay tribute to us, and the West Hill Divine Palace will still not dare to provoke us. There won't be any essential change. It's not about face, it's about honor and dignity. You also came from a frontier army, but why don't you feel like a soldier at all? What should a soldier of the Tang Empire be like? Just like Hua Shanyue just now, with his eyes straight and his hand on the hilt of his sword, walking with the wind like a bully? I don't think so. A soldier doesn't defend the land and open up the frontier by style, but by something else. Something else? Discipline, courage, and trust. By the way, you should know Hua Shanyue, don't you?" Situ Elon looked at him curiously. Ning Ke thought of the moment when he and the senior commander of the Gushin Commandery looked at each other. After a moment of silence, he replied with a smile, "He is the leader of the young generation of the Tang Empire's military. I'm just an ordinary person, so I don't know him. I just met him once, but that was a year ago. Speaking of which, I remember that he didn't like me at that time." Situ Elon didn't know what happened on the grassland trip. She said with a smile, "I found that not many people in Chang'an like you." Ning Ke shook his head and refuted, "You obviously don't know me well enough. You can ask the neighbors on Lin 47th Street. Except for the wife of Wu Lauer next door, who doesn't like me. I also took you to the house of Red Sleeves last time. Look at those girls, who doesn't like me. I don't want to bicker with you." Situ Elon looked at the quiet and secluded house in the depths of the Victory House and said, "Will you go in with us or alone?" "What for?" Ning Ke followed her gaze and shook his head, saying, "I don't want to eat with Her Highness, and she may not invite us in." You really guessed that Her Highness is having a banquet over there. Situ Alan replied with a smile. Her Highness may not ask us to go in normally. But since all the classmates of the Academy are gathered here today, and the guests invited by Her Highness are certainly not ordinary people, then she will definitely ask us to go in later. Ning Ke thought for a moment and understood the hidden meaning in her words, just like Hua Shanhua did before. He couldn't help but laugh sarcastically and thought silently in his heart. Liu, you still can't help developing your power among the young generation of the Empire and enhance your influence. At the same time, you can take this opportunity to show your power to the distinguished guests. It's impossible for more than 100 people to go in, he said with a smile. Later, they will definitely choose some guys with good grades and good moral character to go in to meet Her Highness. How can I have a chance? Situ Alan remembered that she met his little handmaiden Sang Sang in the princess mansion one day and said angrily, You and Her Highness used to be old friends, and now you are also familiar with each other. If I take you in, who dares to say anything? Being able to buy the former censor's mansion in Southern City to open a restaurant, the boss of the Victory House naturally had a deep background. But managing the business of people coming and going, he must be a person with money and power. Although the students of the Academy could not earn much money by booking the Lakeside Terrace, he would definitely find a way to get close to those students in preparation for the future. However, today he did not go to deal with those students at all. Instead, he respectfully waited outside the second door like a manservant. Dozens of handmaidens and servants carried food plates and utensils and walked between the quiet houses. They were well trained and did not make the slightest sound. In the house, only the rustling sound of the wind blowing the treetops could be heard. The boss of the Victory House stared at everyone's movements with his sharp eyes. After confirming that there was no problem, he slightly relaxed and raised his arm to wipe the sweat on his forehead. Being able to book the most quiet and the most expensive backyard of the Victory House, and being able to make the boss of the Victory House willing to serve as a manservant, it could be imagined how distinguished the identity of the guests and hosts of today's backyard banquet was. The host of today's banquet was Her Royal Highness the 4th Princess of the Tang Dynasty, Liu. The guest she invited was indeed a distinguished guest. And if there was no accident, after this guest left Chong and City, he would never have a chance to return to Chong and in the rest of his life. At the end of the shiny ebony floor, 2 low tables were placed opposite each other. On the left side, behind the low table, sat a young man. He was dressed in plain green clothes with a jade hairpin in his bun. He had straight eyebrows and bright eyes, looking extremely calm and gentle. Only a few strands of silver hair could be faintly seen in his hair, inadvertently revealing the depression of these years. The crown prince of the Yin, who had been a hostage in Chong and City for nearly 10 years, calmly looked at the Tang Dynasty's Princess Liu opposite him. He picked up the wine glass at hand and slowly and firmly drank it up. Then he sighed and said, In the 4th year of the Tianqi era, I went to Chong and to travel. In the 6th year, I came back to Chong and City as a hostage. Counting with my fingers, I have known your highness for 10 years. Although you went to the grassland for 2 years in between, we grew up together. I don't know when we can meet again. I can't help but sigh. Brother Chongming, you and I both know that if you still want to meet in Chong and City, there must be only 2 reasons. In this case, it's better not to meet, or if there is a chance, I will go to capital Chong to visit you. Liu smiled slightly, picked up the small wine glass that she had been playing with for a long time, and took a light sip. During the dinner, both of them knew that Crown Prince Chongming would inherit the throne after the death of the Yin Emperor. If the king of a country still wanted to enter Chong, and the capital of the Tang Empire, then there were only 2 possibilities. One was that the Yin kingdom was destroyed by the Tang Empire, and as the king of a dead country, he was taken to Chong and City as a prisoner of war. The second was that he led the Yin kingdom army to attack Chong and City. Of these 2 possibilities, the former was too bleak, and the latter was too impossible. So Liu said it was better not to meet. It's better not to meet. The crown prince of the Yin smiled slightly and said, As you said, if something happens in the future, you can go to capital Chong to see me. At that time, I will be the host and treat you to some new things. It's not a child now. How can I only be greedy for food? Liu smiled and said, but in the future, Brother Chongming, you will be the king of a country. If I ask you for something, it will be convenient. One was the legitimate heir to the throne of the Yin kingdom, and the other was the princess with the highest status in the Tang Empire. It seemed that they were just talking about some childhood friendship before they parted. In fact, who knew which sentence had the disputes in the future? The crown prince of the Yin kingdom was silent for a while, and a bitter smile appeared on his thin face. He raised his glass and said in a low voice, "The king of a country is not so easy. I have lived in Chang and city for nearly 10 years and have long been accustomed to the climate and customs here. In fact, I really don't want to go back." "Brother, your words are not appropriate. The Yin emperor is old and in poor health." Liu shook her head gently. "What's wrong? Father didn't like me at that time, so he sent me to Chang as a hostage. He didn't have any sadness or pain. For 8 years, I lived in Chang city in silence and low-key. Did capital Chang send me a letter of condolences? In fact, the entire Yin kingdom has long forgotten me." The crown prince of the Yin raised his glass and drank it up. A touch of pain flashed in his eyes. "I spent 2 years on the grassland. At that time, I was also worried that Chang city would forget me. But it turns out that as long as you are still alive and come back, then even the distant and faint memory will be picked up again." Liu looked at the crown prince of the Yin firmly and said, "Brother Chongming, it was you who gave me the idea to go to the grassland and let me stay out of it. I got great benefits. Now, Brother Chongming is about to return to the country. I naturally have to give you some gifts. But I know you're not willing to accept them. But you must remember one thing. No matter how bad the situation in capital Cheng is, you are the eldest prince after all. No one can take away the throne that belongs to you." The crown prince of the Yin looked back at her calmly. Thinking of her hard work for his younger brother over the years, he could not help but feel slightly sad. After a self-mocking smile, he said, "The problem now is not that someone wants to take away my throne, but that this throne does not belong to me. In the eyes of all the people of Yin, my wise and mighty brother is more suitable to sit on the throne than this cowardly crown prince who has been imprisoned in Chang for many years." After a moment of thought, he continued softly, "Although I have left capital Cheng for many years, I still remember some things clearly when I was a child. Longqing seemed to be a genius since he was born. Whether it was writing, shooting, poetry, or even cultivation, it seemed that there was nothing in the world that he could not do. Compared with him, I, the crown prince, have nothing special. So my father likes him and dotes on him. It has become a very natural thing for the ministers to trust and rely on him. What's more, he is now a bigwig in the judicial department of the West Hill Divine Palace." The crown prince of the Yin looked at Liu and said, "From the day he entered the Revelation Institute of West Hill, Longqing's mother's family began to build momentum in capital Cheng. Now, this momentum can no longer be suppressed by human power because he has strong support from outside, and the strong support comes from West Hill. I'm still confused, but I will work hard. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation." Chapter 143. It was quiet in the quiet house. Liu looked directly into the eyes of the crown prince. After a long time, she gently opened her lips and said slowly, "We can't do anything without strong help from outside. Longqing has the West Hill Divine Palace behind him. If you are willing, I believe my father will not mind sending a letter of credence to your father." In this world, only the Tang Empire had the power to compete with the West Hill Divine Palace. However, the crown prince did not move or show ecstasy when he heard this. Instead, he fell into a long silence. "Although I don't understand why the West Hill Divine Palace agreed to let Prince Longqing enter Chang city to replace you as a hostage, and I don't want to think about his purpose of entering the second floor of the academy. I only know that the current situation is extremely favorable to you. It is difficult for him to control capital Cheng in Chang'an. Isn't it your opportunity?" Liu looked at the crown prince's slightly drooping eyelashes and said calmly, "The West Hill Divine Palace is indeed a wonderful and holy place. The bigwig of the judicial department is really great. Perhaps many people in the Great River and South Jin Kingdom are laughing at the absurdity of the Tang Empire to take such a person as a hostage. But these people don't know that there is only one place in the world that has enough power to take the number 2 figure of the judicial department as a hostage. That place is the Academy. The Crown Prince finally broke the silence. He looked up at Li Yu's eyes with a dignified expression and said, "The problem is that as far as I know, even the Tang Emperor has limited influence on the Academy. If the Dean doesn't want to restrict Long Qing's personal freedom, and instead let Long Qing make further progress on the 2nd floor, what should I do?" Li Yu frowned slightly and said softly, "After all, the Academy is in Chang'an City. You don't have to worry too much." "This has nothing to do with worrying too much," the Crown Prince of Yin replied calmly. "I know better than anyone what a proud person Long Qing is. People like him are willing to give up their pride and agree to accept the assessment to enter the 2nd floor of the Academy, which shows that the Academy is a very important place for him. What Long Qing is best at is turning all the people or things that he thinks are important to him into his help. Are you worried that if Long Qing enters the 2nd floor of the Academy, the people in the Academy will support him?" Li Yu shook her head firmly and said calmly, "The Academy has never intervened in the internal affairs of the Empire, let alone the fight for the throne of a foreign country." Yin Zitai shook his head and said with a wry smile, "Anyway, I always feel that it's not a good thing to let him enter the 2nd floor of the Academy. If it was purely a bad thing for Long Qing and West Hill, they would not have agreed to Father's request a few months ago." Li Yu was deep in thought. Suddenly, she frowned and muttered to herself, "If he can't enter the 2nd floor, I heard that there's a great scholar from the South Jin Kingdom in the Academy." The Crown Prince of the Yin murmured. The two looked at each other for a moment and shook their heads at the same time. The opening of the 2nd floor of the Academy this time clearly stated that only one person would be accepted. In fact, it was because of the handover behind the scenes. That position was originally prepared for Prince Long Qing. And with that person's ability, even if they could arrange some competitors, it would not be enough to shake him. At this moment, there was a rush of footsteps on the wooden corridor outside the quiet and deep house. The Crown Prince of the Yin looked at Li Yu with an inquiring look. Li Yu replied with a smile, Hua Shanyue and several of his comrades. As soon as she finished speaking, Hua Shanyue, the senior military officer of Gushan Commandery in a dusty military uniform, and several officers beside him walked into the long hall. They first saluted Li Yu with a fist and palm salute, and then greeted the Crown Prince of the Yin. Maids and servants set up the wine table again. Hua Shanyue and several others sat down as ordered, and the house returned to tranquility. Li Yu calmly looked at the Crown Prince of the Yin and said, "I ordered Senior Military Officer Hua to hurry back to Chang, because I want to meet him before you leave, Brother Chongming. I have been stationed in Hebei Province all year round, and may be transferred from Gushan Commandery to Shanin Commandery after the new year." Hua Shanwei added, Shanin Commandery was located in the southeast of Min Mountain, adjacent to the Yin territory. The Tang Empire stationed in this commandery was not as terrible as the border army led by General Xiaohou in the north, but it was the closest armed force in the Tang Empire to the capital of the Yin Kingdom, capital Cheng. In the early years, the Crown Prince of the Yin had seen Hua Shanyue and knew that he was a fanatical admirer of the fourth Princess Li Yu, and was also the focus of the young generation of the Tang Empire's military. He could naturally think that Li Yu hurriedly called him back to the capital, not to see him off, but to hide a deeper meaning. Hearing that Hua Shanyue personally admitted that he would be transferred to Shanin Commandery next year, the Crown Prince of the Yin instantly understood Li Yu's meaning. He looked at the wine bottle on the table and fell into a long time of thinking. Although there was no change of expression on his face, the struggle and conflict in his heart had reached the extreme. After a long time, he said in a slightly hoarse voice, "If things don't develop to the last step, I will never use your chess piece." Li Yu calmly replied, "If we don't have to go to the last step, it will naturally be a happy ending. But if it really comes to the last step, I hope Brother Chongming will have the courage to make the move without regret." I want you to understand that this is not only for the interests of the Tang Empire, but I also hope that you can get what belongs to you. The so-called farewell was just the final endorsement of some transactions and promises. Although there must be a 10-year friendship in it, it was, after all, related to the country. Once the superficial warmth was torn off, it was difficult for the banquet to return to the original cheerful appearance. The scene seemed a little awkward for a while. Hua Shangyue remembered what he had seen outside the house and said with a smile, "The lakeside terrace of Victory House has been booked today. It's noisy there, but it's much livelier than here." "Oh." Liu slightly raised her eyebrows and curiously asked, "Who is so generous?" When she said this, she didn't realize that it was really a big deal that she booked the most quiet and expensive backyard of the Victory House. After all, she was the most respected princess in the Tang Empire. Who could compare with her? They're the students of the academy this year. Situ Elan and Wu Tsai are among them. When I met her before, she said that she would come to toast and greet us later. I thought that your highness specially came to see off-crown Prince Chongming today. I don't know if it's convenient, so I didn't agree. The students of the academy are the pillars of the Tang Empire or the whole world. What's the harm in meeting them? Princess Liu, who is known for being virtuous and cherishing talents, would naturally not miss such an opportunity to win the hearts of young talents. She looked at the crown prince with a smile and said, "I believe Brother Chongming also wants to meet the new students of the academy." "Of course." The crown prince nodded calmly. The students of the academy who were drinking and having fun on the lakeside terrace did not completely forget the previous reprimand of Hua Shangyue. However, he was the county commander of the military and a senior of the academy. In addition, his words were sharp and merciless, but every word was true. There was no way to refute him, so they could only bear it silently and comfort themselves in the name of senior brothers. When they were summoned by the nobles in the backyard of the Victory House, they realized that their so-called pride was indeed not suitable to break out in Chang'an City. In this magical city, they might meet a little marquis who was also drunk when they peed in a side alley. They might meet a prince from the Yueluan kingdom when they were bragging in a tea shop. They just wanted to take the chance to get together, but they actually met the princess of the Tang Empire who was bidding farewell to the crown prince of the Yin kingdom. The Victory House occupied a very large area. The backyard was the ancestral property left by an old censor in the Shinfeng years. It was easy to accommodate 200 or 300 people. But after all, it was summoned by the princess. How could all the students of the academy line up to greet her and turn the quiet courtyard into a vegetable market? They just chose some students with good grades and good reputation as representatives. Among the representatives, there were naturally 6 people in the course of magic skills led by Xie Qingyun, famous talents such as Zhong Dajuan, Chang, and influential children such as Sidu Ilan and Chu Zhongtian, as well as someone. When the students of the academy entered the quiet house, Liu was talking to the crown prince of the Yin in a low voice. Suddenly, she frowned slightly and looked over subconsciously. Sure enough, she saw the familiar and hateful face at the end of the crowd. In the past 6 months, she often called Sang Sang to the princess mansion to talk with her, but she had never seen Ning Ke again. But through various ways, Ning Ke's behavior in the academy still entered her ears. She knew about the semester exam bet, and that he was later excluded by the academy's classmates. But she had never said anything. They just met on the journey. How could the experience of an academy student be qualified to attract her attention? Even if she wanted to, she cannot show it at many times. "Greetings, Your Highness." "Greetings, Crown Prince Chongming." Xie Qingyun, Zhong Dajuan, Lin Chuan Wang Ying, and other students stood in front of the quiet corridor of the courtyard and saluted the 2 nobles at the table in turn. After several exchanges, the students performed well, especially Xie Qingyun, and Wang Ying's words were quite clear and solemn. Liu felt more satisfied, but it was a pity that the 3rd young master Xie was from the South Jin Kingdom instead of the Tang Empire. "Brother Chongming, what do you think of the young talents of the Tang Empire?" Liu looked at the crown prince of the Yin and asked with a smile. The crown prince of the Yin replied with a slight smile, "The Tang Empire dominates the world, and the academy is a sacred place for thousands of years. Naturally, It is extraordinary. At this moment, there was a sudden noise outside the quiet backyard of the Victory House. There were voices of obstruction and reprimand, and it seemed that someone was rushing here. Liu looked at the passage covered by the bamboo outside the corridor and held a small wine cup between her fingers. She did not say anything, but slightly frowned. Hua Shangyue, who was sitting 2 feet behind her, looked solemn and sternly scolded. Who is so bold to break into the banquet place of Her Highness? The noise outside the courtyard quickly turned into a still messy sound that represented a completely different meaning. The music from the bamboo forest behind the corridor suddenly became disorderly and out of tune, faintly mixed with the surprised cries of a young girl and the sound of a messenger knocking over a banquet table in shock. Then, all these sounds disappeared in the next moment. In the quiet courtyard, under the roof porch, next to the bamboo wall, there was no sound. It became quiet, so quiet that it made one's heart palpitate, except for the footsteps that seemed to fall on one's heart on the stone path. The slow footsteps coming from outside the courtyard did not belong to one person and were not orderly. But the ears of the people in the courtyard seemed to hear only the footsteps of one person. The footsteps were very stable and could release a very strong sense of pride just by hearing, as if every step he took was stepping on the heaven's way leading to the firmament. The owner of the Victory House walked in front with a pained and helpless expression like a pitiful servant boy. Although bringing outsiders to the 4th Princess Banquet Place was undoubtedly the fastest way to death, the guest behind him at this time also had a great background. More importantly, the reason given by the other party could not be refuted at all. Walking on the stone path was Grand Secretary Zheng Jing of the Imperial Library of the Tang Empire. This official was deeply trusted by His Majesty and the Empress. There was a faint smile on his face, and his real emotions could not be seen. On the right side of Grand Secretary Zheng Jing was a middle-aged man in a black Taoist robe with a Haotian divine sword on his waist. He was the deputy dean of the Revelation Institute of the West Hill Divine Palace, and Priest Moli, who was visiting the capital Chang'an. Everyone in the Tang Empire knew that although the relationship between the Empress and 4th Princess was not as incompatible as fire and water, they were naturally in the opposing camp because of the succession of the throne in a certain year. Now the chief minister under the Empress was going to break into Her Highness banquet with a bigwig from the West Hill Divine Kingdom, who would be willing to be caught in such a terrible turbulence. Moreover, among the crowd that came to break into the banquet, there was Grand Secretary Zheng Jing and Priest Moli came hand in hand. Logically speaking, they were destined to attract the attention of everyone in the courtyard. However, at this time, everyone's eyes fell on the young man behind them. There was a kind of person in the world that was born with a certain kind of charm. Even if he was a stubborn young man covered in mud among thousands of people, even if he was an ordinary-looking young girl among the dark masses of pious believers, no matter how low-key and silent he walked in the crowd, no matter how many bigwigs surrounded him, as long as he was in the picture, when people looked at him, they would definitely see him first and then be unable to move their eyes away. The young man in the crowd was such a person. He was about 20 years old and wore the lifeless Taoist robe of the Judicial Department of the West Hill Divine Palace. There was an ordinary-looking sword on his waist. His footsteps were calm and steady. Silently following Grand Secretary Zheng Jing and Priest Moli into the courtyard, he instantly attracted everyone's attention. Prince Longqing's handsome eyebrows and eyes were impeccable, reflecting the faint light from the treetops and shaking off the lingering willow catkins. Just like that, Prince Longqing appeared in people's vision, like the Son of God. There was no negative emotion on his face. He was calm, but just like the clear and rigid rhythm of his footsteps, everyone present could feel his pride. The pride that was hidden deep in his body, to the point that he disdained to show it. After a short silence, people in the empty and quiet courtyard subconsciously stood up to greet him. The academy students instantly guessed the identity of this person. Their faces showed a faint confusion and a slight uneasiness in their eyes, and their emotions seemed extremely complicated. Sitting at the top of the table, Liu slightly lowered her eyes, and a surprised, cold, and vigilant look flashed in her eyes. Sitting opposite her, the Crown Prince of Yan's eyes were more complicated, a little sad, and then he slowly stood up with a gentle smile on his face and said, "Long Qing, it's really been many years." At this time, Ning Ke, who had been sitting in the most remote corner of the courtyard and kept complaining that the etiquette of kneeling was really not in line with human mechanics, finally noticed these uninvited guests. He opened his mouth and looked at the outstanding Prince Long Qing in the crowd and exclaimed, "It's really a click of thunder. The male pighorn finally shines on the stage. Tomorrow is Saturday. I'm off. Besides, I know it's slow to write now. There's no other way. I try my best. Don't force me to die. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation." Chapter 144. Priest Moli, the deputy head of the Revelation Institute, explained that Prince Longqing had caught a cold on his way from West Hill to Chang, and the capital of the Tang Empire. He had been recuperating in Peach Alley, so he had not been able to visit his brother. Today, he learned that the Crown Prince would return home tomorrow, so he rushed here to see him despite his illness. How could a bigwig of the Judicial Department of West Hill Divine Palace, a powerhouse on the edge of knowing Destiny's State, be bettered by a cold on the journey? Naturally, no one believed this excuse. Everyone present knew that Prince Longqing just didn't want to meet the Crown Prince too early. However, on such an occasion, since the West Hill had given an excuse, everyone could only accept it. How could they rebuke him? From a moment Prince Longqing entered the courtyard, everyone's eyes were attracted to him, especially the female students of the academy. They whispered and praised him, and some of the girls gradually became infatuated with him. Hearing Priest Moli's excuse, they could not help but wonder how he would answer and whether he would show an embarrassed expression. Prince Longqing did not answer. When Priest Moli explained, he just sat quietly on the table next to the Crown Prince of the Yan. There was no embarrassment on his face. To be more precise, apart from some polite smiles, there was basically no emotion on his picturesque face. It was as if he was telling everyone present that he knew this was an excuse, and it was a boring one. But what did it have to do with him? His whole body exuded a sense of righteousness and seriousness. Even his picturesque face could not dilute it. It was not until then that people gradually remembered that Prince Longqing had an even greater identity besides being a cultivation genius and a fan of thousands of people. He was in charge of the Judicial Department of the Divine Hall and had great power and prestige. After the two parties sat down, someone introduced each other. Knowing that Prince Longqing was accompanied by Grand Secretary Xingjing, the students of the academy couldn't help but stand up to salute him. The Grand Secretary Xingjing was the official of council who lived opposite the Xianwei General's mansion. Because of the disturbance in his house, the Empress was furious, but it turned out to be a blessing in disguise. He offended the big families in Qinghe County and was appreciated by His Majesty and the Empress. From then on, he became one of the few important officials in the court. Although the students of the academy were proud, if they could not enter the second floor, they would still become officials in the imperial court after graduation. How could they dare to offend such a bigwig? As for Ning Ke, who was sitting in the corner, his thoughts were different from those of his classmates. He curiously looked at the high-ranking official in the distance and thought to himself, "You didn't have such authority when I was young. I am Wang Ying from Linchuan. Greetings, Grand Secretary. I am Zhong Dajun of Yangwan. Greetings, Grand Secretary." Xie Qingyun from the South Jin Kingdom greets the Grand Secretary. Xie Qingyun stood up and greeted the Grand Secretary with a smile. Some people noticed that he did not say that he was a junior. After thinking for a while, they understood that he was not being rude to the Grand Secretary, but he did not want to be at a disadvantage in front of some people. Mr. Xie's talent has spread far and wide. I have lived in Chang and for a long time and have heard of your achievements in the South Jin Kingdom's imperial examination. It is really gratifying to hear that you are diligent in the course of magic skills in the academy. Grand Secretary Zheng Jing smiled and stroked his beard. He looked at Prince Longqing, who was sitting opposite him, and said, "Your Highness is known as a genius of the present age. Now that you are entering the academy for further study, you should get closer to Mr. Xie. Upon hearing this, Prince Longqing nodded slightly, as if he agreed with Grand Secretary Zhang Jing's words. But because his movements were so subtle, it was hard to see his sincerity. There was no expression on his beautiful face, and he did not deliberately reveal a cold and arrogant look. But this expressionlessness revealed a very accurate message. That was, he did not care. An eagle would not show its pride in front of an ant, and a mountain would not deliberately look down on a small hill. Because in their view, they did not exist in the same world, and there was no need to show extra emotions at all. But for the receiver, this kind of indifference was the heaviest pride and arrogance, and this kind of disregard was undoubtedly the most ruthless contempt and humiliation. Xie Qinyun, the third young master of the Xie family, who had always been known for his talent and demeanor in the academy, stood alone in the field for a long time before returning to his seat with a slight smile. Only by paying attention could one notice that his smile was somewhat unnatural. It was just a small episode. The real problem of today's Victory House banquet had been hidden behind the scenes. When Prince Longqing and the Crown Prince of Yin met, whether they fought or not, it was always an internal struggle for the throne of Yin Kingdom. Princess Liu was obviously on the side of the Crown Prince of Yin, and Grand Secretary Xingjing came with Prince Longqing. Although it seemed that he was accompanying His Majesty, who could be sure that he did not represent the Empress's inclination? The throne of Yin Kingdom was related to the relationship between the two countries, and at the same time, it would further strengthen or weaken the power contrast between the two royal families of the Tang Empire. But in front of the people of Yin, the West Hill Divine Priest, and a group of students, both Princess Liu and Grand Secretary Xingjing had to maintain the dignity and bearing that an empire should have. His Majesty ordered me to accompany Prince Longqing to familiarize himself with the surroundings of Chang. Although we did not have a deep conversation, I deeply felt that the prince's knowledge was extraordinary and admirable. Coupled with his amazing cultivation, it would not be difficult for him to enter the second floor of the academy. Grand Secretary Xingjing gently stroked his beard and looked at Prince Longqing opposite him, shaking his head in admiration. No one knew what this trusted official of the Empress had in mind. He actually praised a foreign guest in front of a group of academy students. Even if it was to suppress the cooperation between the princess and the Crown Prince of Yin, it was really too unsightly. The representatives of the academy students at the banquet were usually the best group of people in the academy, and they were born with pride. They might not know about the throne of Yin Kingdom, but when they saw the scene of Prince Longqing ignoring Xie Qinyun, they had a great disgust for him. At this time, when they heard Grand Secretary Xingjing mention the matter of the second floor of the academy, they suddenly remembered that Prince Longqing was their strongest competitor and could not help but be shocked. Zhong Dajuan raised his eyebrows and said, "The second floor of the academy is not so easy to enter." The Tang Empire was open-minded, and it was not uncommon for people to casually interrupt in such a banquet, especially when the dispute arose. Grand Secretary Xingjing smiled slightly and did not say anything more, as if he was not surprised by such a response. Priest Moli, who had been silent and sitting at the banquet table, coldly glanced at the banquet and indifferently said, "There are many talents in our West Hill Divine Kingdom. Prince Longqing is the most outstanding person in our Revelation Institute in the past 10 years. He is about to enter the knowing destiny state in 20 years, and can be regarded as the strongest person in the young generation in the world. If he can't enter the second floor of the academy, who can?" As the deputy headmaster of West Hill Revelation Institute, he had a distinguished status. However, no one had expected that his words would be so direct and even a little arrogant. However, there was a saying that crude words were not crude. He casually put out a few nouns, and with the real examples of these years, his crude words seemed even more powerful. If the strongest person in the young generation in the world could not enter the second floor of the academy, then who could? Entering the knowing destiny state and entering the knowing destiny state are two different things. Hua Shanyue, the senior military officer of Gushan Commandery, said with a slightly gloomy face, "There are many people in the world who are known as cultivation geniuses, but they have been stuck at the threshold of the knowing destiny state all their lives. Although I'm not as talented as Prince Longqing, Prince Longqing is now only at the peak of the see-through state. To say that he is the strongest person in the young generation. I don't know if this is an overpraise, but I am afraid that the priest's words are overpraising. Priests of the West Hill Divine Palace traveled around the world and were treated with great respect. However, when they entered the territory of the Tang Empire and entered Chong, and the officials seemed to be warm and courteous. But in fact, most people were like Hua Shangyue at this time, looking down on these Taoist priests who pretended to be mysterious. Once they were angry, they did not care about rhetoric, refuting, questioning, and mocking words, and swung at them as hard as a stick. Priest Moli forcibly suppressed the anger in his heart and stared at Hua Shanyue's eyes, saying coldly, "There are indeed young powerhouses in the Great River, South Jin, and Yuan. But in recent years, I really don't know what kind of bigwig has appeared in the Tang Empire." Hua Shanyue did not show weakness and stare back at him, saying, "Wang Jinglu of the Tang Empire is now serving under the Defender General of the state. Because of the rules of the Imperial Center Administration, he is now only a bodyguard, so he is really not a bigwig. But no one can take away his title of being invincible below the knowing destiny state." These words were really powerful. Wang Jinglu of the Tang Empire did not come from the West Hill and had nothing to do with the Buddhism sect. He became a talent purely through self-cultivation and was known as invincible below the knowing destiny state. Although Prince Longqing came from the West Hill Divine Palace and was known as a peerless cultivation genius, as long as he had not entered the knowing destiny state and had not defeated Wang Jinglu, he could not be called truly invincible. The quiet house fell into a short period of silence, and then the silence was quickly broken by an extremely calm voice. The voice belonged to Prince Longqing, who had been silent throughout the banquet. Prince Longqing raised the wine glass in his hand and looked at Hua Shanyue quietly. But his clear eyes seemed to be looking at somewhere far away, falling on the military camp beside the vast great swamp. He said indifferently, "Invincible below the knowing destiny state. I have wanted to change this title for him a long time ago, but unfortunately I have not found the opportunity. General Hua, if it is convenient, please pass a message to Wang Jinglu for me. I hope he can go to Chong, and as soon as possible. You know, it is not convenient for me to leave Chong and city now." Prince Longqing retracted his gaze and looked into Hua Shanyue's eyes without a trace of emotion. He said, "If he appears late, I will not have the opportunity to change his title." Facing the pair of calm and emotionless eyes, Hua Shanyue's heart trembled slightly. He could not help but choke and swallow the words he had prepared, because what he saw in Prince Longqing's eyes was not the desire to fight after being provoked, but the calmness and confidence from before. Many people present understood this sentence. If Wang Jinglu appeared late, he would not have the opportunity to change Wang Jinglu's title. It did not mean that he could not fight with Wang Jinglu, nor did it mean that he thought he might fail, but because he firmly believed that he would step into the knowing destiny state in the near future. At that time, if he defeated Wang Jinglu, wouldn't Wang Jinglu still retain the title of invincible below the knowing destiny state? He was sure that he would step into the knowing destiny state in the near future, and even felt that it was a pity that he did not have the opportunity to fight with Wang Jinglu and defeat him. What kind of experience did he have to go through to be so confident and indifferent? Being shocked by the Prince of Yin Kingdom, an enemy from the Judicial Department of West Hill, Li Yu's delicate eyebrows slowly frowned. Thinking of the old men in the Imperial Center Administration and the young powerhouses that emerged in the surrounding countries in the past few years, she could not help but feel a faint sense of powerlessness. For hundreds of years, the Tang Empire was strong and its military power was unparalleled. However, as long as the people in the back of the mountain of the academy did not take action, it was extremely difficult to find a person who could compete with the foreign enemy at the individual level. It was a great pity. Her eyes swept across the students of the academy present and thought with a trace of anger. If you were really the cultivation genius that Mr. Liu Qingshun had placed his hopes on, I would not have been forced into such a situation by this prince on such an occasion. While her thoughts were still wandering, She could not find Ning Ke in the corner, which made her even more annoyed. In the side alley of the Victory House, Ning Ke stood beside the Wu Xiang horse carriage and waved his hand impatiently to Sang Sang, who stuck her head out in confusion. He said, "Didn't you always make a fuss at home that you wanted to see Prince Longqing up close?" Sang Sang explained very seriously, "Young master, I only said it once that night. I didn't make a fuss all day long." Ning Ke spread out his hands and said, "Well, do you want to see?" After getting a positive answer, he took Sang Sang to the Victory House. He took out a piece of silver with some distress and handed it to the servant of the Victory House. Then he walked through the no longer noisy terrace and approached the quiet house. He thought that Sang Sang wanted to see, so he took her to see. Anyway, Li was familiar with her, so there should be no problem. Since childhood, they had lived together and had long developed a certain habit. When they saw something that the other liked, they would subconsciously save it for the other, such as fried egg noodles, hot and sour noodle slice soup, lu shui, silver, and the prince. In the quiet courtyard, everyone's attention was attracted by the previous debate, and then shocked by the strong confidence revealed in Prince Longqing's calm words. No one actually noticed that he had quietly brought Sang Sang into the field. Among the light and elegant music, there were occasional whispers. The chief's seat, Priest Mo Li, the deputy head of the Revelation Institute, looked proud, while Grand Secretary Zheng Jing was expressionless. The atmosphere seemed a little depressing. Xie Qingyun looked at the wine cup on the table and suddenly shook his head slightly with a smile. After taking a deep breath, he stood up and saluted with hands folded in front. Looking at Prince Longqing, he said loudly, "May I ask?" Hearing these three words, the courtyard suddenly became quieter, and the background music quietly disappeared. Liu looked at the elegant Xie Qingyun standing in the field with some appreciation in her eyes. But thinking that this person was not a Tang, she inevitably felt a little regretful. Prince Longqing bent his knees and half knelt on the floor. After carefully tidying up his clothes, he looked at Xie Qingyun with a serious expression for the first time today and said seriously, "Brother Xie, please." In the corner of the courtyard, Sang Sang knelt behind Ning Ke and cautiously poked her head out. She whispered after a few glances, "Young master, it's too far, even farther than that day on the street. I can't see his face clearly." "Don't interrupt." Ning Ke picked up a piece of vinegar fish skin with his chopsticks and stuffed it into his mouth. He said, "Didn't you see the main show? It's rare to see two great scholars debating." Sang Sang didn't know what debating was. She curiously looked over there and asked, "Young master, who do you think will win?" Ning Ke took a sip of wine and shook his head. He said, "I only hope Xie Qingyun won't die too miserably. Sang Sang doesn't know what debating is, and I don't know what debating is either. So it's destined not to be written directly. If you want to see it, please read The Wonderful Cold Scholar of Upper Grade. You can choose one of the scenes in it and pretend that I wrote it. Like a piece of tofu, you should walk away with shame. Like a piece of tofu, you should write the first grade as the upper grade. You should continue to walk away with shame." To be continued. If you like this work, please come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 145. The topic of the debate was set by Grand Secretary Zheng Jing. As soon as the debate began, Xie Qingyun, who was invincible in the academy in debating, knew that he had encountered an unshakable mountain. Prince Longqing tidied up his appearance and began to debate with a dignified expression. It was not because he was afraid of his opponent, but because he respected the wisdom that debate itself represented. At the same time, he also expressed a certain degree of appreciation for Xie Qingyun's courage. When the debate began, he showed no mercy and began to show his true level that was superior to his peers. Countless words flowed out of Prince Longqing's lips like beautiful lotus flowers around the topic of the debate. Countless classics of the predecessors were cleverly selected and organized by him, turning into a complicated and clear net. It often took the listener a long time to understand the true meaning. What shocked and speechless all the students present was that in this debate, Prince Longqing did not use the divine canon of Haotian Taoism in West Hill at all, but used the views of the Academy's classics. Just as Ning Ke predicted, Before Prince Longqing's expressionless narration, Xie only made a slight counterattack, and then he was caught in the sea of lotus flowers. He could not see any mistakes, nor could he find the slightest gap to fight back. He could only watch the other side weave the Taoist language net more and more tightly, and he had no power to fight back. Ningke was neither good at nor fond of such means of seeking truth from ancient books and metaphysics. When he was 4 years old, he found that the exercises he solved in the mathematical Olympiad class were of no help to his begging life. Since then, he had firmly established a life principle. No matter how wonderful and profound it was, if it could not be used in front of a knife or on the table, then it would be meaningless to his life, and there was no need to continue to study it. Well, calligraphy was an exception because he loved it. In short, he did not like debating, and it was impossible for him to have a good impression of Xie Qingyan. It was difficult for a marginalized person who had been forgotten by the Academy for half a year to have any sense of collective honor. But he did not want to see the handsome and hateful prince with facial paralysis continue to be arrogant. So he ignored what was happening over there and took Sang, who also did not understand, to hide in a dark corner, drinking wine and eating fruits and vegetables, waiting for the moment to end. The headmaster of the academy once said, "If you don't change your ways for 3 years, that is the way." Prince Longqing ended his speech with the conclusion of the headmaster of the academy 30 years ago, which also ended the completely one-sided debate. It was dead silent in the courtyard. All the students of the academy silently looked at the indifferent prince sitting in the middle of the table and did not know what to say. The girls, including Situ, Ilan, and Jean Wucai, all felt a little wet on their backs. Such a meticulous but sharp person was really terrible. What's more, he used all the academy's classics and finally used the headmaster's scripture as the anchor. How could they still have the face to pester him? At this moment, the crowd finally understood why Prince Longqing, who was handsome and quiet and spoke little and gently, gave people an inexplicable sense of pride and indifference. This couldn't be entirely blamed on him for being arrogant. It was just that the people around him subconsciously felt that they were inferior in front of his great power. Over time, this talented prince got used to this way of getting along with others. Thus, he became the silent but proud person he was today. Before you complain that others always like to ride on your back, you should first consider whether you have taken the initiative to squat down. Ningke looked at his classmates in front of him, who were like frozen quails. He shook his head and said, "You are always so proud and unyielding in front of me, but today you are like a chicken after hitting an iron plate. How shameful." Sang took the wine that he quietly handed to her and took a sip. She looked at the front and said, "It seems that Prince Longqing is very powerful." As if to answer the little handmaiden's doubts, Priest Moli, the deputy head of the Revelation Institute, looked at the students of the academy and added with great satisfaction, "Prince Longqing's way of debating is something that even the elders of the Lank Temple admire." The atmosphere was inevitably a little awkward. The middle-aged general from the Gushin commandery who was sitting on the lower left side of Liu suddenly laughed and said, "I, Zhang Jianxin, am a boorish man. I really don't understand what the prince and the child are talking about. But I know that any banquet must have wine to liven things up. Today, everyone is here to send off Crown Prince Chongming. I don't have anything good in the Gushin commandery, so I only brought dozens of bottles of Nine River double-distilled wine. I asked the captains to bring them to the backyard. Now, please have a taste." The Nine River double-distilled wine from the Gushin commandery was not an ordinary wine. It was a high-strength wine brewed by double distillation. This high-strength wine was used by an emperor of the Tang Empire to soften the minds of the grassland barbarians and corrupt the iron blood of the tribes. It had a miraculous effect. Since then, it had become a closely guarded secret craft of the Tang Empire. It was often used to bargain with the grassland tribes in negotiations and was rarely drunk by people. The reason why the Nine River double-distilled wine was rarely drunk by people, and even the palace did not choose it as a tribute wine, was not only because it was not easy to brew, but also because it was too strong. An ordinary strong man would be drunk after drinking a big bowl of it. Although the strong wine was in line with the fierce and generous temperament of the Tangs, they could only drink it in small mouthfuls when they thought that they were broad-minded. It would be too unsightly if they were drunk even a little bit. Therefore, the Tangs had to bear the pain and give up. The rare Nine-River double-distilled wine from the Gushan Commandery was divided into small bottles and sent to each table. Then, more delicate wine utensils were replaced. The previously oppressive and tense atmosphere in the courtyard eased a little. However, no one expected that the general from the Gushan Commandery, named Zhang Jinshin, would ask the maidservant to remove the small wine cup in front of him and replace it with a big bowl. After filling the bowl with the strong wine, he stared into Prince Longqing's eyes and asked in a low voice, "I wonder if the West Hill Divine Palace forbids alcohol?" Prince Longqing looked at the small wine cup in front of him and shook his head with a faint smile. This was the first emotion other than gentleness and indifference on his flower-like face since he entered the courtyard. He exuded a charm that made the girls who were secretly against him because of the damage to the Academy's reputation feel dizzy again. General Zhang looked solemn and raised his left hand to hold the bowl with both hands. He solemnly said, "Back then, I had also fought with the Yin Kingdom's cavalry under Min Mountain. Now, nearly 10 years have passed, and the two countries are as friendly as before. I would like to toast this bowl to Prince Longqing. I hope you don't mind. However, the Nine-River double-distilled wine is extremely strong. There has always been a saying on the grassland that one can't get on a horse after 3 bowls. I wonder if Prince Longqing can drink it. Do you dare not drink it?" As soon as these words came out, the courtyard became quiet again. In the corner, Ninkei looked at that place and shook his head. He said, "Is this forcing or making a scene? Vulgar, really vulgar. The old and young men of our Tang military who have withdrawn from the front line are so honest, or should I say stupid. That prince is a big shot at the peak of the see-through state. Drinking with him is like playing dice with your young master. It's purely asking for abuse." As he spoke, he emptied the bowl that he had used to drink rice wine and poured a small can of Gushan Commandery wine into the bowl. Then, he carefully covered the bowl with his sleeve and handed it to Sang Sang behind him. The Nine-River double-distilled wine was indeed extraordinary. In an instant, the fragrance of the wine filled the air. Sang Sang, who was usually calm, could not suppress the joy on her face, and her eyes lit up. In the depths of the courtyard, Grand Secretary Zheng Jing found the scene boring and came to the rescue. He gently patted the folding fan in his hand and looked at General Zhang Jinshin with a solemn face. He said, "Since we have repaired the friendship, why don't we drink together?" The Grand Secretary's expression turned solemn. Even the Tang Frontier Army General did not dare to act rashly. However, somehow, Zhang Jinshin seemed not to have seen it. He still held the bowl with both hands and looked at Prince Longqing coldly. He said, "Drink together or drink with each other. I only have one question. Prince, do you drink?" At this time, Ninkei took a sip of the liquor and frowned because of the spiciness. When he heard these words, why did he feel that he could only drink with 1 ladle of water? He frowned and looked in that direction. He thought that General Zhang had previously claimed to be a rough man, but it was probably fake. He deliberately used vulgarity to intimidate others and used his vulgarity to defeat the enemy's elegance and pride. In the current situation where the Empire's face had been repeatedly damaged, it was a strange move. Maybe it was secretly instructed by Li Yu. However, just like one of the 2 foundations of Prince Longqing's pride, what did these things have to do with Ninkei? When he found that Sang Sang liked the Nine-River double-distilled wine very much, he was busy pouring wine from the wine can and secretly handing it to Sang Sang behind him. Then, he secretly stole wine from a classmate beside him and secretly fed it to Sang Sang. He repeated this tirelessly and carefully, and he was never tired of it. When the master and the servant hid in the dark corner of the courtyard and secretly drank the wine, the situation on the other side changed again. When many people thought that Prince Longqing would ignore the Tang general's invitation for a drinking competition with his usual indifference and pride, they saw a faint smile suddenly flashed between his picturesque eyebrows. He gently waved his right hand, and the wine can under the table quietly flew to his hand. Then, Prince Longqing's right hand turned the wine can upside down. The clear wine poured out with a pungent fragrance and instantly filled the big bowl. Before the wine really overflowed, he raised his left arm and brought the wine bowl to his lips. Like a whale sucking water, he drank the liquor in the bowl in a whirlwind. His movements were very natural and unrestrained. Zhang Jianxin, the general of Gushan Commandery, was slightly stunned. It seemed that he did not expect that Prince Longqing, who was known for his pride, indifference, and seriousness, would become so casual and natural in the face of his invitation for a drinking competition. After a moment, he woke up and remembered that he was still holding the wine bowl, so he hurriedly brought it to his lips and drank it. However, when he just held the wine bowl to his lips, he found that Prince Longqing on the opposite table had already filled the second bowl of wine and drank it in a very natural and unrestrained manner. The third bowl, the fourth bowl, the fifth bowl, even on the grassland, there was a legend that one could not get on after 3 bowls of the Gushan Commandery's 9-river double-distilled liquor. Zhang Jianxin dared to invite a drinking competition, so he was naturally a master of this. However, facing Prince Longqing's calm and unwavering drinking, he finally could not resist and fell down with a red face. Maids and servants carried General Zhang, who reeked of alcohol, away. The Tang people in the courtyard felt very disgraced. It was extremely vulgar to invite a drinking competition, but in the end, it was drunk by this prince who looked like a figure in a painting. This was not only vulgar to the extreme, but also extremely shameful. Prince Longqing held the 8th bowl of liquor in his hand and did not put it down because of his opponent's drunkenness. He still drank it slowly and then looked at the people in the courtyard calmly. With a trace of deep exhaustion, he said with a smile, "In my life, I first worked hard to seek Taoism. Then I took charge of judgment, killing the remnants of the devil's doctrine, punishing the traitors of Haotian Taoism, and punishing the heresy. I have never been soft-hearted, and I have strictly adhered to the laws of the divine canon. I never allowed myself to make mistakes. Up until now, it can be said that nothing can disturb my mind except for one thing, and that is good wine. Wine can connect the way of heaven and man and can penetrate the mysteries. It is a gift from Haotian, so I've always thought that if I use my own cultivation to overcome the effects of wine, it would be a reckless waste of God's gift. I have been fond of wine since I was a child, but I did not drink it often. Since I left capital Cheng when I was young." He calmly glanced at his elder brother, the crown prince, who seemed to be forgotten by the people in the courtyard, and continued, "I have only drunk wine 4 times in these years, one of which was in the palace of Yueluan Kingdom. Because of Chunjia, I was misunderstood by some people, and they fought with me in rounds of drinking. The wine was not as strong as today, and they did not stop until all the wine jars in the palace were empty. After that, the pillars in the palace still had the smell of wine for 3 days, but I was not drunk. Good wine is the most wonderful thing, and it is also a demonic sound that erodes bones. So I rarely drink, unless there is a situation where I have to drink, such as in Yueluan Kingdom, or today, when the general forced me to drink with the pain of the country." He calmly said, "Where there is wine worth drinking, such as this double-distilled wine from Gushan Commandery, or there is a worthy opponent." At this point, Prince Longqing once again filled the bowl in front of him and raised it with one hand. He looked at Xie Qingyun in the courtyard and said, "This bowl is to thank the 3rd young master for your courage." Xie Qingyun was slightly stunned and sighed in his heart. He changed the big bowl to fill with strong wine and drank with him. Prince Longqing poured another bowl of strong wine, looked at Linchuan Wangying beside Xie Qingyun, and calmly said, "Linchuan Wangying, you know etiquette well at the age of 12. I have read your notes on etiquette the year before last." Linchuan Wangying was only 15 years old this year and was still a teenager. He did not know the reason for the open and secret fights in the previous banquet, and did not expect that they would talk about him. Hearing that Prince Longqing had read his notes on etiquette, he could not help but feel excited and happy, and hurriedly picked up the small wine cup in front of him and drank it. Unsurprisingly, a moment later, Xie Qingyun and Linchuan Wangying were drunk because of the strong wine. But the 2 drinks were peaceful and joyful, and no one in the academy felt unhappy. Instead, everyone, including Zhong Dajuan, filled the wine cups in front of them and waited for Prince Longqing to order them in order. Prince Longqing held the bowl of liquor in his hand and looked at the students in the field. He did not intend to propose another toast. Instead, he brought the liquor to his lips and drank it slowly. Then he put down the bowl and did not look at the audience again. The academy students could not help but feel a little awkward. Even Ning Ke, who followed the crowd in the corner and filled up the wine, felt very uncomfortable in his heart, and the little good impression he had for this guy suddenly disappeared. Prince Longqing looked at the empty wine bowl with a faint smile and sighed softly. The academy is really famous. I only hope the real academy will not let me down. You really have a big tone. Liu looked at him with slight mockery and said, if you don't know what the real academy is, how can you come thousands of miles to be a hostage? How can a hierarch lord and the 3 great divine priests be willing to let you, a bigwig of the judicial department of the Divine Hall, give up your job and come to the academy to be a student? Prince Longqing was silent for a while, and then he raised his head and replied calmly, Your Highness is right. Liu looked at him quietly and suddenly said, Longqing, I admit that you are indeed talented and capable, and you have the right to be proud. But since you are in charge of the judicial department and know the doctrine of Hao Yin, you should know that everything is too much to be forced, and that everything does not enter your heart. Why do you have to go against your will and act so arrogantly? Hearing this question, Prince Longqing was silent for a long time, and his handsome face gradually glowed. He slowly and firmly answered, There is no solution to the poverty of the country, so I can only be more arrogant. He said this very calmly, directly, and frankly, clearly stating that the Yin kingdom was weak and not the enemy of the Tang Empire. And as a member of the royal family of the Yin kingdom and a person of the West Hill, if he were to be a hostage in Chang, then he should be arrogant, so that he would not be weak because of the situation and always remain strong. Prince Longqing continued, As for not drinking, it has nothing to do with arrogance, but because I can't find anyone who can drink with me. Sidu Alan could not help but whisper, A man's ability should be on the battlefield, not on the wine table. What's the use even if he can drink more wine? This lady's words make sense. Prince Longqing calmly replied, Only those who are good at fighting can fight, and only those who are good at drinking can drink with each other. Since there is no fighting today, naturally there is no drinking. Among the young students present, who could fight with Prince Longqing? Xie Qingyun, who was the most popular in the academy, had already been defeated. So who could drink with Prince Longqing? He had already drunk nearly 10 bowls of strong wine, and he claimed that he was not drunk in his life. There was an awkward silence in the courtyard. The people present were shocked by the West Hill Divine Palace, and no one dared to challenge him. This was really an unbearable shame for the Tang Empire and the Academy. Liu's jade-like hands gently grasped the silk scarf in her sleeves. When she was ready to leave, she suddenly heard a gurgling sound from the corner. At this time, it was so quiet that even a needle falling on the ground could be heard. So the gurgling sound, which was originally very subtle, was suddenly magnified and attracted the puzzled eyes of all the people present. The sound was like a clear spring flowing through the waterway opened by Nanju and falling into the slightly icy mountain stream. It was also like a long-necked stork waking up from the wetland grass in the morning and proudly combing its neck feathers. It was very beautiful and attractive. Everyone, including Situ Ilan, opened their eyes wide and stared at Ning Ke in the dark corner. They carefully listened to the gurgling sound coming from behind him and were somewhat puzzled. A moment later, Sang Sang, who was thin and dressed in handmaiden clothes, came out from behind Ning Ke on her knees with an empty wine bowl in her hands. Then she was shocked to find that she had become the focus of attention. She did not know why everyone present was looking at her, as if she was a fairy. Sang Sang found that so many eyes were staring at her, and felt extremely uncomfortable. She raised her right sleeve to wipe her mouth, and carefully put the wine bowl on the table in front of Ning Ke, and then quietly returned to behind Ning Quebec. Until then, people found that there were 4 wine cans neatly placed beside the table in the corner. Note: I saw that sentence in Mu Fei's Weibo and quoted from Gigi, but I forgot the specific words when I wrote it. So, I strongly call for recommendation votes on Monday. It's not easy for everyone. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to vote for recommendation votes and monthly votes. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 146. After entering the courtyard, Ninkei deliberately chose the darkest and most unobtrusive corner. However, he did not expect that no matter how low-key he was, the sound of Sang Sang drinking behind him still exposed his position like a firefly in the middle of the night. Facing dozens of complicated and shocked gazes, he was extremely uncomfortable, especially when he saw the fiery gaze of the princess in the distance. He felt that something was wrong. He thought to himself, "Liu, you idiot, please don't drag me into this mess." Facing a fierce existence like Prince Longqing, no matter how talented I am, I can only be a fool. Ideals were always full, but reality was always harsh. There was always a gap between the two. The more you were afraid of something, the more it would come to you. The next moment, Ninkei heard Princess Liu's deliberately cold question. "Ninkei, have you finished the 4 jars of wine beside you?" Ninkei glanced at the 4 small jars beside the table, scratched his head, and replied, "I think so." Liu smiled and said, "Although they are small jars, 4 jars of wine is more than a dozen bowls of wine. How can you drink such strong wine? You are really a good-for-nothing." Ninkei glanced at her from afar and thought, "Although I know that you like me very much, even though you are scolding me on the surface, don't blame me for turning against you and taking Sang Sang away if you continue to say such words in front of so many people." Even though he thought so, he still answered honestly. Sang Sang drank all of it. Sang Sang is only 13 years old. It is really beyond my expectation that she can drink so much strong wine. Liu gently turned the small wine cup between her fingers and said with a faint smile. She did not look at Prince Longqing, nor did she say a word to him, but everyone present knew the hidden meaning in her words. Only those who are good at fighting can fight. Only those who are good at drinking can drink. That little girl drank more than a dozen bowls of strong wine without collapsing. Is that considered a good drinker? Prince, are you going to lower yourself to drink a cup of wine with her? Priest Molly looked at Xiang Luo. With his strong eyesight, he could naturally see Sang Sang hiding behind Ninkei, wearing a handmaiden uniform. He asked unhappily, "Is that little girl also a student of the academy?" This matter cannot be faked. The relationship between the academy's students and Ninkei was indifferent, even vaguely hostile. Someone answered, "That is Ninkei's little handmaiden." Priest Molly flew into a rage and said, "Today's banquet is to send off the crown Prince of Yen. It's so important. It is not easy for the academy students to attend. How can you let a little handmaiden mingle with you?" This anger was not pretentious, but was his real emotion. The West Hill Divine Kingdom had always been strict and valued. The West Hill Divine officials had always paid attention to the hierarchy and order. It was indeed a great insult for them to drink with a lowly little handmaiden. However, this was Chang'an, not the West Hill Divine Palace. Liu glanced at the deputy headmaster of the Revelation Institute and said, "That little girl is familiar with me. She is a young friend." The royal family of the Tang Empire is so generous that they can ignore the rules of etiquette. But Your Highness, there are 2 members of the royal family of the Yin Kingdom and I, the West Hill Divine Priest. Don't you need to consider our feelings? Priest Molly said angrily. Is this the way the Tang Empire treats its guests? Liu's face darkened when she saw the aggressiveness of the other party. She said, "Today's banquet is for me to bid farewell to my old friends." Who would have thought that someone would come uninvited? Is this the way the West Hill treats its guests? There are good and bad guests. If anyone thinks that the Tang Empire does not treat its guests well, you might as well reflect on which type you belong to. If you still don't know, then see where the door is. This was the source of the Tang Empire's strength. Previously, when they were at a disadvantage in the battle of reason, Liu and the others could tolerate it and wait quietly. But when it came to the momentum after being reasonable or being unreasonable after being forced, who in the world could be a match for the Tang Empire? Priest Molly's face turned red with anger at Li Yu's words. However, facing the Tang princess who was about to lose her temper, what could he do or dare to do? It was not a battle of words, but more like a one-sided argument. Some people noticed a change in the table and gradually stopped talking, because they saw that Prince Longqing did not seem to hear the anger of Priest Moli, nor did he feel the strength of the Tang princess. He just quietly looked at the table in the dark corner, suddenly smiled, raised the wine bowl in his hand, and drank it up. The banquet suddenly became quiet, and everyone looked at the corner again. After a while, Sang Sang poked half of her face out from behind Ning Ke and asked in confusion, "Young master, what do you mean?" Ning Ke looked down at his small wine cup and the rice wine bowl for Sang Sang. He quietly tapped the table with his fingers, and after a moment of silence, he suddenly asked, "Is the wine good?" Sang Sang nodded and said yes. "Do you want more?" "Yes." Ning Ke looked up and turned to look at her with a smile. He said, "Then continue." Sang Sang was a little embarrassed and said, "How can I steal the wine when there are so many people watching?" "You don't have to steal the wine." Ning Ke looked up and smiled. The dimple on his left cheek seemed to be able to hold countless wine. He pulled Sang Sang out from behind and said, "Sit beside me and drink openly. Drink as much as you want until you don't want to drink anymore." After being pulled out, Sang Sang hurriedly sat beside him and smoothed the front of her clothes. She lowered her head and did not want to meet those inexplicable gazes. She murmured in a very low voice, "How can I do that?" Ning Ke looked at Li Yu, who was at the top of the courtyard, and spread out his hands to show his helplessness. Li Yu smiled slightly and looked at the academy students present. She asked, "I wonder who is going to enter the course of magic skills on the second floor of the academy this time? I wonder how your preparations are going." Her Highness had asked a question, so they naturally had to respond. Moreover, the students present had vaguely guessed the princess's good intentions. Therefore, no matter how shocked and curious they were, they could only look away from the corner. Sang Sang did not know what this meant. She only knew that no one was looking at her like that anymore. She became much more relaxed, and once she relaxed, the enchanting aroma of the wine from the wine jar became even more alluring. Looking at the full wine bowl in front of her and making sure that no one was paying attention, she hurriedly brought it to her lips with her two small hands and drank it in one gulp. Then, she wiped the wine stains on her lips with her sleeves and put her hands on her knees to show that she had done nothing. Prince Longqing, who was seated in the distance, did not seem to see this scene. His gaze fell on the floor not far in front of him, but for some reason, he laughed and drank the wine in one gulp. This was a strange banquet. It was a banquet to see off the Crown Prince of Yin, but the Crown Prince of Yin, who had been smiling gently and saying nothing, was forgotten. Her Highness and the Academy students seemed to be enthusiastically discussing the life of the Academy and the events of the day after tomorrow, but in fact, no one cared about the content of the conversation. Everyone's thoughts or glances fell on two places. The handsome Prince Longqing, who was as graceful as the Son of God, kept drinking the wine in his bowl in silence and thoughtfully. The tanned little handmaiden, who was as quiet as a little rabbit, kept drinking the wine in her bowl with her head down. It seemed that they were drinking to drown their sorrows. But the more Prince Longqing drank, the more solemn his expression became, and the more Song Song's eyes became brighter. The words and fragments of gazes floating in the air seemed to be intoxicated by the wine, quietly falling on these two places. No one seemed to notice, but in fact, everyone was paying attention. Because of the secret order, the boss of the Victory House personally moved more than 30 jars of double-distilled spirits from the Gushin Commandery to the backyard, and then placed them at the top and the corner respectively. Sang Sang had been soaked in the corpses and rainwater for too long when she was a baby, so her body was congenitally cold. Sometimes when the disease broke out, she could only rely on the strong wine to stimulate the heat in her body to survive. So Ning Ke habitually carried a wine bag with him. Since childhood, she had been relying on strong wine to sustain her life. She gradually fell in love with drinking and gradually found that it was difficult for her to get drunk. It was just that the master and the handmaiden were too poor when they were young. Even the cheapest burnt grain wine in Min Mountain, or the worst horse milk wine in the grassland, could not be infinitely drunk. Especially she liked strong wine, and the stronger the wine, the more expensive it was. Even in Chang and City, after the two suddenly became rich, they had never drunk as much as they did today. The wine was the Gushin Commandery Jiuzhong double-distilled wine, the strongest wine in the world. Moreover, they could drink it all the time without spending money. For a poor girl like Sang Sang, this was undoubtedly the happiest enjoyment in the world. The wine jars beside the table were emptied one by one. She had completely forgotten that the purpose of her young master bringing her here today was to see that annoying prince. She had also forgotten what kind of occasion she was in and how many people had stared at her before. She just felt happier and happier, and her willowy eyes became brighter and brighter. Prince Longqing was not slower than her in drinking. After a slight, dignified look on his unparalleled handsome face, it gradually turned into some kind of interest and puzzlement, as well as a kind of hidden excitement and fervor that he had finally met his match. More than 30 jars of double-distilled spirits were finally drunk. Everyone in the field looked at those empty wine jars and thought that the spirits that were enough to make several horses drunk were actually drunk by these two people. They could not help but feel that it was extremely inconceivable. Prince Longqing did not use his cultivation to detoxify the wine. More than 10 jars of spirits finally made his inviolable cheeks, which were as awe-inspiring as the Son of God, loosen a little. His eyes were somewhat blurred and confused. But Sang Sang, who was sitting in the corner, only blushed a little, her abdomen slightly bulged, and her eyes became countless times brighter than usual. Other than that, she was as calm as usual, without a trace of drunkenness. Ning Ke glanced at Prince Longqing in the distance and glanced at Sang Sang beside him. He laughed and picked up his chopsticks to heavily knock on the wine jar. With a clear and crisp sound, it was the sound of victory. For a moment, the whole room was silent. The drunkenness in Prince Longqing's eyes gradually dissipated. He looked at the corner and expressionlessly asked, "Young man, are you Ning Ke?" Ning Ke stood up and answered, "Yes." "Is it your little handmaiden?" "Yes." "Reward." Ning Ke and Sang Sang looked at each other and saw no hesitation in each other's eyes. He smiled and respectfully replied, "Thank you for the reward, Your Highness." Prince Longqing calmly said a few words to the Taoist child behind him. The Taoist child from West Hill came forward and looked at Ning Ke standing in the corner with a gentle expression on his face. He said loudly in a tone as if he was bestowing a gift, "The prince is studying in Chang and is about to recruit people in his mansion. Today, Hao Yin gives you the honor and gives you the opportunity to offer your little handmaiden to serve his highness. Hurry up and thank him." To be continued. If you like this work, please come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 147. At that time, servants and maids were like private property and could be disposed of at will. The situation in the Tang Empire was slightly better. The law of the Tang Empire strictly forbade the intentional injury of slaves, but did not forbid the sale of slaves. It was not uncommon in Chang and to give beautiful concubines and smart maids to them, and the gifts between the distinguished men were often legendary and beautiful. When the West Hill Taoist child said Prince Longqing's words, no one present felt strange. Although the students of the academy, Huashan Yue and other Tangs were somewhat disgusted by the Taoist child's arrogant and generous words, it was, after all, in line with the class difference between the two parties, so they remained silent. In the eyes of the crowd, little Sang Sang, who was standing beside Ning Ke, was only 13 or 14 years old. She was as thin as a bean sprout, with an ordinary appearance and dark skin. Prince Longqing naturally did not want to take her back to his mansion to warm his bed because of her beauty, but because of the drinking competition. The bigwig of West Hill, who was high above, had taken a fancy to an inconspicuous little handmaiden in Chang, and because of the 4 arts of zither, chess, calligraphy, painting, banquets, archery, and so on. In the upper class, this was considered elegant. If Ning Ke was willing to give the little handmaiden to Prince Longqing, the prince would naturally give him a generous gift in return. It might be another anecdote in the future. Therefore, no one felt shocked, strange, or angry. Instead, some people, such as Zhong Dajuan, cast a faint look of envy at Ning Quebec. They secretly thought that if Ning Ke could gain Prince Longqing's favor by gifting the little handmaiden, he would be able to gain a lot of benefits and convenience in the future. Princess Liu also remained silent at this time, but her silence had nothing to do with her demeanor. She was thinking about something that happened last year and looked at Ning Ke with a faint smile, knowing that this matter might develop in an interesting direction. In fact, after hearing the West Hill Taoist child's gentle and extremely generous announcement, Ning Ke was stunned for a long time before he figured out what the other party wanted to do. The reason why his reaction was so slow was that he had never thought that anyone would ask for sang-sang from him in such an arrogant manner. Why? Sorry, there's no reason or reason. It's just because he's the high and mighty Prince Longqing, a bigwig in the judicial department of the West Hill Divine Palace. He likes your little handmaiden and wants to have a little handmaiden to drink with him when he's bored. So you should send your handmaiden, who you've raised painstakingly and slept by the Kong bed for more than 10 years to him, and then smile and wait for the prince to reward you with money, a bright future, and some glory when he's happy. Because the scientific reasoning was actually unreasonable, Ning Ke's mood suddenly became extremely bad, but the smile on his face became brighter. He looked at the table in the distance and sighed. Prince Longqing, you are really beautiful. His reaction was very slow. Sang-sang, who was slow to react to many things, especially after drinking too much liquor today, reacted even slower than him. It was not until now that she realized that the prince at the banquet wanted to take her away from her young master. She couldn't help but frown and refute. Young master, he looks ugly. Sang-sang had not thought, and as she had thought, as long as if master, as long, she would become. They only cared about Ning Ke's answer and had been quietly waiting for his answer. Most of them guessed that Ning Ke would agree, and a few of them thought that he would refuse. But no one expected that Ning Ke's answer had nothing to do with this matter. It seemed somewhat inexplicable. Prince Longqing, you are really beautiful. What does that mean? Note, Prince Longqing had just sobered up and was quietly looking at the empty wine jar on the table. Suddenly hearing this, he slightly frowned and raised his handsome face to look into the distance. He said indifferently, Thank you, I know. Since you know you are beautiful. Ning Ke looked at that place and said very seriously, Then don't be too optimistic. As soon as these words came out, the whole table was in an uproar. Even if the people present had thought that Ning Ke would refuse to send his little handmaiden, they also thought that he would use a very graceful way to refuse, such as saying that he was used to using this little handmaiden, that this little handmaiden came from a rough background, and so on and so forth. But they did not expect that he would refuse so simply, directly, crudely, and fiercely. You want my little handmaiden? You are too optimistic. Prince Longqing's face gradually darkened, but then he smiled a little. Ning Ke looked at him with a smile and explained, The reason is very simple. Because I am not willing. Prince Longqing slowly stretched out his hands from his sleeves and calmly placed them on the table. He calmly looked at Ning Ke in the dark corner in the distance and slowly said, Because you are not willing, you may have missed a lot. I never worry about missing anything. Ning Ke replied. Prince Longqing's sharp eyes fell on his face from a very far distance. After a moment of silence, he said, It may even be my friendship. Ning Ke slightly raised his eyebrows and replied, Maybe your friendship is not as valuable as you think. Hearing this, Prince Longqing's picturesque eyebrows seemed to be plated with a layer of frost. He said in a low voice, It seems that you value your little handmaiden very much. Ning Ke replied with a smile, What does it have to do with you? Prince Longqing coldly said, The master of the little handmaiden is really interesting. I am more and more interested in you. Ning Ke shook his head and said, Mix your interest with wine and drink it, if you can still drink. When the two were talking, it was quiet in the courtyard of the Victory House. Even the birds outside the Yinyu corridor were nervous and did not dare to make sound. As the conversation went on, people's faces became more and more wonderful and strange. They never thought that Ning Ke, an ordinary academy student, could actually talk with the bigwig of the judicial department of the West Hill Divine Palace. Not only did he not lose the upper hand, but his words were extremely sarcastic and tough. Prince Longqing's expression was still calm, but everyone could see the burning emotion in his indifferent eyes and the tough meaning revealed in his words. Only he coldly asked, "But I am still very curious, in your mind, who is qualified to be the master of this little handmaiden?" Under this strong power, Ning Ke seemed to feel nothing. He slightly raised his eyebrows and replied, "In fact, this still has nothing to do with you. But since your highness is so interested, I can only say, at least you are not qualified." "If I am not qualified, then who is qualified?" Prince Longqing laughed loudly, but there was no joy in his laughter, only some kind of strong confidence and domineering. The laughter gradually stopped. He glanced at the silent Li Yu and asked, "Is it Her Highness?" Ning Ke smiled, and the dimple on his left cheek was particularly small and fresh. He said, "No, she is not." As soon as this sentence came out, there was another uproar. However, before these shocked and complicated emotions could ferment, Li Yu smiled and gave an answer. She looked at Prince Longqing and the others and said, "I have asked this guy for Sang Sang several times, but he did not care about me. So obviously I'm not qualified. As for you, Prince Longqing, I think you're not more qualified than me." In the field, Prince Longqing and the people of West Hill and Yin had been in the upper hand for a long time. Li Yu had been silent and watching the chess game without saying a word. She was the most favored princess of the Tang Empire. Even if you were a peerless genius, a bigwig in the judicial department of West Hill, and a prince of Yin Kingdom, you were not qualified to be mentioned in the same breath as me. I did not care about Ning Ke's repeated rejection. So what right did you have to care? This was a very simple and powerful logic, which was the typical principle and style of the Tang people. The princess of the Tang Empire made a strong endorsement, and this little storm seemed to come to an end. Sang Sang pulled Ning Ke's sleeve and looked up, saying, "Young master, let's go home." Ning Ke smiled and nodded. However, everyone present, including Li Yu, did not expect that he did not leave. Instead, he reached out and rubbed Song Song's head. He looked at Prince Longqing and said very seriously, "Prince, I have a few questions to ask you." Hearing this sentence, many people present thought of what Xie Qingyun had said when he stood up, and suddenly there was a silence. The academy looked at Ning Ke in shock, thinking that the third young master Xie had been defeated in the debate. Did this guy, who avoided the exam by claiming to be sick, want to make a big splash? Prince Longqing's expression gradually became serious. He reached out to tidy up the front lapel of his clothes, sat up straight, and spread out his right hand, saying, "Please, don't get me wrong. I have no interest in debating. In fact, I am not good at it. I am just a little confused about your previous confidence, so I have a few questions to ask you." Ning Ke took a step forward and asked, "Prince, may I ask if the firmament has eyes?" The clear blue sky was gray and cloudy, and snow was falling. How could there be eyes above the winter sky? Even the stars above the night sky could not be regarded as eyes, right? However, although Ning Ke said it was not debating, Prince Longqing still responded very cautiously. After a little thought, he understood what Ning Ke meant. How Yin lived above the firmament and looked down on millions of people with compassion and benevolence. Then the firmament naturally has eyes. Ning Ke then asked, "Is there primordial qi between heaven and earth?" Prince Longqing replied, "Of course there is." Ning Ke quickly asked the next question, "Is there any regularity in the fluctuation of primordial qi?" Prince Longqing replied, "Yes." "Does a locust tree have roots?" "Yes." "Does the milkworm have life?" "Yes." "Does a normal person have thoughts?" "Yes." "Does the Tang Empire have an emperor?" "Yes." "Does the West Hill have doctrines?" "Yes." Ning Ke asked the questions faster and faster, but these questions were indeed very simple and had nothing to do with the debate. Prince Longqing answered faster and faster as well. Their questions and answers were as quick as frying beans. The crowd became more and more confused about what he wanted to do. At this moment, they heard Ning Ke's next question. Are there holes in the socks? Of course. Prince Longqing suddenly raised his eyebrows and stopped talking. Then he looked at Ning Ke standing in the field with a faint smile, as if he was looking at a pitiful worm whose cleverness had been crushed. He continued to answer in an indifferent tone. No. This series of questions was dull and even boring. But because it was related to Prince Longqing and the previous storm, everyone listened very carefully. When Ning Ke asked the questions, all the students thought along with him and silently answered with Prince Longqing in their hearts. When the last question appeared, they even directly answered yes in their hearts. Until now, when they heard Prince Longqing's sudden change of topic and answered no, they thought for a while and were shocked to realize that all this was just a verbal trap set by Ning Quebec Sidu. Elon frowned and thought for a while. She looked at Ning Ke and shook her head. She lowered her voice and said to Jean Woodside beside her, "It's a pity that we didn't make Prince Longqing look bad." Prince Longqing was indeed a bigwig in the judicial department of the West Hill Divine Palace, and a genius who was the center of attention. However, at the most critical moment, he found that Ning Ke's series of questions were just to lure him into a certain psychological pattern and verbal inertia. Ning Ke wanted him to make a mistake on the last question, which was so simple that it was stupid, and wanted him to admit in front of everyone that the socks had holes. Naturally, he would not be fooled. He looked at Ning Ke with a pitiful and disgusted look and said, "I didn't expect that I would patiently listen to your question, but in the end, it was just this kind of petty cleverness. I really didn't expect you to do that." Ning Ke also looked at him with a faint smile. After a moment of silence, he shook his head and said, "It's indeed a petty cleverness, but it's a pity that you can't even deal with it. I'm really disappointed." No one understood what he was talking about. They thought he was talking nonsense out of shame and anger. Those academy classmates who had always been estranged from him turned their heads and showed that they were ashamed to admit that they were classmates. Ning Ke shook his head and looked down at Sang Sang. He sighed and said, "Do you remember the story I told you when you were young? How did most of the bears die in the end?" "They died of stupidity." Sang Sang said, "Young master, you were right the other day. Most men who are too good-looking are not smart." Then she looked at Prince Longqing and explained seriously, "If there are no holes in the socks, then how do you put them in?" Once again, everyone was silent. Those who understood the matter were dumbfounded and shamefully lowered their heads. They did not understand the matter, but looking at the expressions of the people around them, those who could guess were dumbfounded and had no time to lower their heads. Liu and Sidu Ilan couldn't help but smile. The expressions of the people from West Hill were extremely ugly. As for Prince Longqing himself, after being called a man who was not smart by Sang Sang and figured out the abominable language trap, his face was so gloomy that it looked like a beautiful watercolor painting on a rainy day. "I asked you just now, and you also answered me. We all know that Hao Hian has eyes. He is looking at the mortals in the secular world. You and I are like insects under the locust tree, living in the primordial chi of heaven and earth. We have to follow certain rules." Ning Ke looked at Prince Longqing and said calmly, "These rules in the Tang Empire are the golden words of the emperor or the laws of the Tang Empire. In West Hill, they are the laws of the Holy Church. However, no matter which one is, it clearly recognizes that everyone's private property is not to be violated. Therefore, my things are always mine. As long as I don't agree, then don't think about taking them away." Only then did everyone realize that there was such a hidden meaning in those seemingly boring questions. Ning Ke continued, "I asked these questions just to let the prince know these principles. Even if you answer the answer that a 3-year-old should know, it would be meaningless. Of course, the socks have holes, and of course, my handmaiden is mine. As long as I don't agree, you can't take away a penny from me." Prince Longqing stared at his face, and, after a long silence, he suddenly laughed and said calmly, "What you said makes sense, but I also know some other principles. If you don't have power, even if you only have the last penny on you, sometimes it will be difficult to protect it." Ning Ke smiled and asked, "Prince, are you threatening me?" Then he looked at Zheng Jing and Li Yu at the table. He bowed with his hands folded in front and asked seriously, "Your Highness, Grand Secretary, he is threatening me. What should I do?" Grand Secretary Zheng Jing was pushed to the wall by his words. He stroked his beard and said with a forced smile, "How could there be such a thing? You must have misheard." Li Yu replied with a smile, "Do you want to fight to your death with your insignificant ability?" Suddenly, she changed the topic and said calmly, "But I really don't know who dares to threaten the people of Tang Empire in Chang'an." This sentence was the real threat. Priest Moly flew into a rage. He slammed the table in front of him and was about to stand up. However, at this moment, Prince Longqing coldly looked at his former teacher and forcibly suppressed him. Then he looked at Ning Ke and asked with a smile, "You are also a student of the academy. Will I see you when I enter the second floor?" Someone suddenly answered, "He didn't even enter the course of magic skills, so naturally he can't enter the second floor." The person who interrupted was Zhong Dajuan. Ning Ke's previous question about the socks had directly embarrassed everyone present, and he felt the most strongly. At this time, when he heard Prince Longqing's question, he immediately pointed out that Ning Ke had no cultivation potential and was not qualified to enter the second floor, as if he could humiliate Ning Ke in this way. Prince Longqing looked at Ning Ke expressionlessly and said, "That's a pity." After a moment of silence, Ning Ke smiled and said, "Perhaps there aren't so many regrets in the world." Sang Sang pulled his sleeve and said for the second time, "Young master, let's go home." Ning Ke glanced at Zhong Dajuan and the other students of the academy and said, "I know you have always been ashamed to be associated with me. Today you will only think that I played some tricks, but I don't care. I just want to remind you to put these moral thoughts into your studies. If you still can't answer these questions that even a 3-year-old can answer in the future, then it will be my turn to be ashamed to be associated with you." After saying this, he bowed to Li Yu and several officials of the imperial court, and then turned to leave with Sang Sang. As he walked out of the courtyard, Ning Ke sighed with emotion and said, "Peerless genius. Hope for resurgence." Then he shook his head and sighed with a smile. Pia Pia. Listening to the constantly floating voices, there was an awkward silence. Prince Longqing's face was extremely ugly. Note, I like this line very much. In my hometown dialect, people often say this to satirize others for overestimating themselves. Do you think you are prettier than others? P.S. I wrote this chapter very painstakingly, and every paragraph was dug out. I hope the effect is good. In addition, I miss home. My favorite shaman is not beautiful now. Finally, I need a recommendation vote. In the next few days, I will probably only be able to read 3K, and then I will be too embarrassed to ask for votes. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 148. Pia Pia was the crisp sound of the soles of shoes hitting the cheeks. It was a pity that the people in Chang and City had not seen the comedians in skirts in that world, so they probably could not accurately understand the meaning they wanted to convey. Ning Ke walked out of the courtyard with Sang Sang, chatted with Chu Yuxian for a while, and then went out of the side door. However, they had not gone far in the horse carriage when they heard the rapid and dense sounds of hooves coming from behind. Song Song's thin shoulders slightly tightened. She looked up at him, her willowy eyes full of suspicion and vigilance. Ning Ke smiled and patted her shoulder, comforting her. Even if the prince is so angry that he dares to send his subordinates to kill or beat us in Chang, and he would not be so idiotic as to follow us as soon as we left the house. His judgment was not wrong. The luxurious carriages with soft ropes on them were branded with the emblem of the imperial family. The coachman saw this and hurriedly shouted for the carriages to move to the side of the road. However, he did not expect that these carriages with the emblem of the great Tang imperial family would slowly stop. The green curtain was lifted, revealing Li Yu's beautiful and pleasant face. Her brows were slightly furrowed, but there was a smile at the corner of her mouth. Her true emotions could not be seen. Ning Ke hurriedly got off the horse carriage with Sang Sang and respectfully walked to the window to bow. He might not have any respect for the princess deep in his heart, but he did not dare to show it on this crowded street. "I heard that you're not popular in the academy a few days ago." Li Yu smiled and looked at him by the window. After a pause, she said, "At the banquet today, Even though you were standing up for the academy, you did not make your classmates feel like they were on the same side. From this, it can be seen that your relationship with the academy is not bad, but extremely poor. Ning Ke replied with a smile. Popularity is a strange thing. It's like the weeds growing on the city walls. Wherever the wind blows, the weeds will run. If you're not popular, it just means that the wind you blow isn't strong enough. What you said is interesting, Li Yu said with a smile. Ning Ke scratched his head and looked at the woman behind the window. He replied, I only said it because your highness could understand. Li Yu sighed. If other people heard you talking to me in such a tone, they would be shocked at your impudence. Ning Ke smiled and bowed with hands folded in front. That's because her highness is virtuous and we are old acquaintances. Naturally, I don't need to be too particular with my words. Li Yu sighed, stared into his eyes, and said, You are a young man. You are not impudent when you should be. You are only impudent in front of me. Ning Ke felt strange hearing this. After a moment of silence, he replied with a smile, Your Highness, your words are unreasonable. At least I believe that Prince Longqing will think that I am presumptuous enough today. Thinking of Prince Longqing's gloomy face, Li Yu felt refreshed as if she had been washed by the spring breeze. She looked at Ning Ke with satisfaction and then at Sang Sang beside him. She praised, You did well today, but you are not afraid of offending the Yin Kingdom subjects and the West Hill Divine Palace just because of a temporary dispute. You are much more courageous than before. To be honest, it is not like your original temperament. This was a seemingly ordinary but sharp question. Only those who had been in contact with Ning Ke knew that this soldier from the border town had always cared more about benefits, such as life and death. He had never cared about fame or humiliation. At this time, Ning Ke recalled his previous tough and sharp words at the banquet and found it somewhat interesting. He smiled and shook his head, explaining, I don't know why, but I'm very unhappy when I see Prince Longqing's behavior. When the little Taoist boy said those words, I really wanted to flip the table and kill him, but, Your Highness, you also know that I'm not capable of killing him, so I can only stab him a few times to get some interest. This is just the interest? Li Yu said with a smile. Then she thought of the big event the day after tomorrow and the Yin Kingdom's crown Prince Chongming, who seemed to be forgotten today. She gradually stopped smiling and looked at Ning Ke seriously. After a long silence, she said in a low voice, This year, only one person can enter the second floor. That person, could it be you? Ning Ke looked at the serious look of the woman in the window and did not know how to answer. I don't care what the West Hill Divine Palace and the Yin Kingdom are thinking. I also don't care what agreement the Imperial Court has reached with them. I only know that I really don't want to see Prince Longqing enter the second floor. Li Yu stared into his eyes and said. Ning Ke looked back in her eyes and spread his hands helplessly. He said, Prince Longqing is a cultivator standing on the threshold of knowing destiny's state and a bigwig of the judicial department of the West Hill Divine Palace. And I am just an ordinary student of the academy. Don't you think too highly of me if your highness expects me to be an obstacle on his path to glory? The light in Li Yu's eyes gradually faded. She looked at Ning Ke's clean and fresh but still ordinary face and thought that she was really out of her mind. How could she have thought of pinning her hopes on this guy? She could not help but laugh at herself. She stretched out her hand through the window and gently pinched Song Song's cheek. She praised, You are much more capable than your young master. In the past 6 months, Sang Sang often went to the princess's mansion to play and was very familiar with Li Yu. She did not resist such intimate actions. She burped and said softly, Young master is the real, capable one. Hua Shan Yue, the senior captain of Gushan Commandery, came to the side of the royal carriage. Looking at the carriage that was about to disappear at the corner, he suddenly said, I haven't seen you for a year. I didn't expect that young man from Border Town to enter the academy. On the journey last year, Mr. Liu Qingshan once said something to me. He said that since we can be sure that Ning Ke can enter the academy without any reason, why can't we believe that he can enter the second floor? Liu looked through the window and looked at the lively crowd on the street in front of her. She said indifferently, Today when I saw him talking in the courtyard, I suddenly thought of this sentence. I thought of Mr. Liu's strange hope for him, and could not help but have a thought. Could it be that I have misjudged him this time? Today, his performance at the banquet was indeed wonderful. He did not embarrass the Tang Empire and the Academy. But this is, after all, just some skills and words. If he were to face a peerless cultivation genius like Prince Long Qing on the battlefield, as he said before, it would be overestimating him. Hua Shanyu commented indifferently. In his opinion, comparing an ordinary student of the Academy like Ning Ke with Prince Long Qing should not be considered in this way, for it was too absurd. Maybe what you said is right. Liu put down the cyan curtain and leaned back on the golden cushion. She raised her elbow to support her chin. There was a playful smile between her clear and sharp eyes. If you are really a talent, then you will eventually become my talent in the future. She smiled and murmured, because at least I already know what your weakness is. When the carriage gathered and chatted in the middle of the street, a large group of people walked out of the main entrance of the Victory House. They wore Taoist robes and looked solemn. They were the people from the West Hill Divine Palace. Prince Long Qing walked in the middle of the crowd with a calm expression. As soon as he went out, his beautiful face attracted a lot of screams from the women on the street. Listening to these cries of joy and admiration, he was not moved by this, nor did he show a look of disgust. He was just solemn and quiet. He slowly stepped on the golden carriage engraved with Fu characters. He closed his eyes and kept silent for a moment. Suddenly, he opened his eyes and said indifferently, "That Academy student is not a cultivator." Priest Moley, the deputy dean of the Yutian Academy of West Hill, sat respectfully opposite him. Although they were teacher and student in the past, there was a gap between them when Prince Long Qing became the second person in the judicial department of the Divine Hall after the Tao Edict. No one dared to cross it. Priest Moley frowned and said angrily, "I don't know if it was deliberately arranged by the Tangs." Prince Long Qing thought of the little handmaiden hiding in the dark corner and shook his head expressionlessly. Outside the carriage, melodious music drifted in from who knows where. Prince Long Qing suddenly smiled gently. His handsome face was as dazzling as a peach blossom. He murmured with emotion, "I can't believe I would lose my composure for a little handmaiden. It seems that my Taoist heart is also covered with dust after entering Chang'an." After confirming that Ning Ke and Sang Sang were not cultivators, he didn't want to care about this matter anymore, because his pride lay in other higher levels. His purpose of coming to Chang and was to enter the second floor of the academy. However, Prince Long Qing's smile gradually faded, and he said indifferently, "Find out who that student is. I hate him very much." Back to the old brushpen shop on Lin 47th Street. Sang Sang untied the big black umbrella wrapped in coarse cloth on her back and prepared to wash rice and cook rice. Today they drank a lot of hard liquor, but the delicate fruits and small dishes that the nobles liked could hardly fill their stomachs that had been honed by the sandstorms of the frontier fortress. Ning Ke sat on the chair by the window and stared blankly at the blue sky with his hands on the window lattice. Thinking of the encounter in Victory House today, he suddenly frowned and said, "I don't know why I hate that guy very much." He didn't say who it was, but Sang Sang knew it was him. She poured the water from the well into the big pot and wiped her hands on her apron. She looked back at the window and said, "I don't know why I hate His Highness so much now. I was going to touch his face and ask him what kind of powder he used." The next day, Ning Ke went to the academy as usual. Then he found that his classmates looked at him in a strange way. They probably knew what had happened yesterday, but for some reason, they still looked at him with faint contempt and quickly withdrew it. After the bell rang, Siddhavalon caught him in the Yinyu corridor and said regretfully, "Yesterday you won the reputation for the academy. Everyone was grateful to you and even felt guilty. But why did you say those words to provoke them before you left? It's a pity that you missed the chance to repair the relationship." "I didn't mess it up, so why should I give them the chance to repair it?" Ning Ke answered with a smile and went to the old library. Late at night, Ning Ke looked at Chun Pippi, who came out of the bookshelf panting. He handed him the expensive crab porridge with both hands and placed a futon for him. Then he bowed with both hands folded in front and bowed very seriously. Chun Pippi held the crab porridge and was stunned speechless. The smile on Ning Kei's face was extremely sincere, which was many times more genuine than the salted duck egg yolk in the Academy's crab porridge. He looked at Chin Pippi and said sincerely, "Tomorrow only one person can enter the second floor. I really want to enter, but I really don't want Prince Longqing to enter. Tell me, how much hope do I have? Don't look at me like that. I know Prince Longqing is like the son of God from heaven, and I'm just an ordinary lump of dirt in the human world. It seems hopeless to compete with him in terms of cultivation state and strength, and to beat him in the entrance test. But I think if you secretly tell me the exam questions, maybe there will always be hope in the human world." To be continued. If you like this work, please come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 149. After Ning Kei said this, the old library fell into silence. Chun Pippi stared at his eyes, and after a long silence, his thick lips slightly moved, and he said, "You are really beautiful." Ning Kei was so angry that he stared back at him and said coldly, "Even if you don't want to reveal the exam questions, you don't have to talk to me like this. I don't believe that I can't enter the second floor without your help." Chun Pippi looked at him and shook his head pitifully. He said, "You have said many times that you want to enter the second floor. I didn't pay much attention at that time. I thought that although your aptitude was much worse than mine, it would not be difficult for you to defeat the so-called talent Xie after half a year of careful guidance from me. However, who would have thought that the West Hill Divine Palace would be willing to let Longqing come to Chang'an City? With this person in front of you, you really have no hope at all. I remember clearly that you said a few days ago that in your eyes, Prince Longqing is just some cats and dogs. Now you say that I am not qualified to be compared with him. Does that mean that I am not even as good as a cat or dog in your eyes?" Ning Kei said angrily, waving his sleeves. Chun Pippi raised his fleshy arm and patted his shoulder. He sincerely comforted him. "You don't have to say it so clearly. I was worried that it would hurt your self-esteem, so I didn't say it directly." "Then why does it matter if you tell me the exam questions?" Ning Kei said angrily. "It's no good for you if I can't enter the second floor. If Prince Longqing enters the second floor and finds out your real identity, you will also cause a lot of trouble. Because you are unlucky." Chun Pippi looked at him sympathetically and said, "The headmaster of the academy and eldest brother have not returned from their travels. Although the second floor is opened according to the dates set last year, it is second brother and the professors in the front yard who are in charge of it. The professors will not tell me the exam questions. Even if I know, I can't tell you at the risk of being whipped by second brother. Second senior brother is a righteous and serious man. He hates dirty tricks and shameless tricks the most in his life. If he knows that you want to use my back door, even if you enter the second floor, he will beat you and kick you out." He patted Ning Kei's shoulder again and comforted him. "You are really unlucky. If the headmaster of the academy and eldest brother are here, they are very easy to talk to. Maybe I can ask them to let you enter the second floor." "What a pity." Ning Kei sat cross-legged on the floor and thought that if what Chin Pippi said was true, then his luck was indeed terrible. He could not help but sigh bitterly. The headmaster is really too much. How can there be so many fun places in the world? It's really irresponsible of him not to return to the academy after playing for a year. Chin Pippi's face was full of disdain as he exposed his thoughts. "You want the headmaster to rush back to the academy because you want him to be irresponsible." After a moment of silence, Ning Kei patted the floor heavily and looked up into Chun Pippi's eyes. He said seriously, "Well, I don't expect you to leak the questions, but you have to at least tell me how to enter the second floor. It is better to know the general scope and methods of the exam than to be confused now." "I can tell you." Chun Pippi picked up the crab porridge and happily swallowed half of it. He said vaguely, "But it is useless to say this." "Why?" Ning Kei asked nervously. "Because the exam method is different every time the second floor opens. The specific content is decided by the headmaster of the academy years in advance. You may be asked to write a piece of calligraphy or draw a picture. You may also be asked to swim in the wetland, or you may even be asked to eat faster. Take that year." Chun Pippi began to introduce with great interest, but Ning Kei's mind drifted elsewhere. When he heard that it might be calligraphy and painting, his mind buzzed, and he felt extremely happy. However, when he heard what Chun Pippi said, the happiness or surprise suddenly turned into confusion and extreme absurdity. Wait, swim and eat? What's this test about? Chun Pippi put down the crab porridge in his hand, looked at him innocently, and said, I'm not the headmaster of the academy. How would I know what the test is about? But I heard it from my senior brothers and sisters, so it shouldn't be false. Ning-Kei slightly raised his eyebrows and looked at his fat face. He hesitated and asked, Then what did you take that year? Upon hearing this question, Chun Pippi gently waved his sleeves to wipe off the non-existent dust on his clothes. A calm and composed smile appeared on his face as he put on a calm and unperturbed demeanor. Then, he slowly said, I've told you that I'm a rare cultivation genius. That year, I directly entered the second floor after I got 6 A+ grades. The headmaster of the academy greeted me with a smile on the mountain road, and eldest brother rubbed my head affectionately. There was no need for me to be tested. This should be called exemption from the examination. Ning-Kei looked at the complacent expression in his bean-like eyes and suddenly had a strong impulse to beat him up. But when he thought that this fat man was a cultivator in the knowing destiny state who was more vigorous than Prince Longqing, he had to dispel this idea. He sneered and said, In my opinion, you are a big pot of steamed buns. Chun Pippi touched his head and asked curiously, Is it cute to be white and fat? No, it means that you are purely a foodie. Ning-Kei angrily scolded. You claim to be the treasure of the academy and the most favored younger brother of the second floor. But you don't know what the exam is, and you don't know either. I even pinned all my hopes on you and bought you such an expensive bowl of porridge. He thought of Prince Longqing's graceful figure when the second floor opened tomorrow, thought of his own miserable ending, and looked at Chun Pippi's helpless expression. He felt more and more annoyed and reached out to grab the porridge bowl beside him and poured the remaining half of the crab porridge into his stomach. Oh, why did you drink all of it? No one knew whether Chun Pippi was angry because the crab porridge was robbed or because he was called a foodie. He pointed at Ning-Kei's nose and scolded, I am a useless foodie. If it weren't for me, I am really useless. Ning-Kei lowered his head. His expression could not be seen, but his voice was a little tired and gloomy. In fact, I have always thought that I am a real genius and can learn everything quickly, including killing horses, cows, and chickens. But cultivation really hurts my confidence. After so many years, I finally made some progress last year. But now when I see Prince Longqing, I can't have the confidence to fight him head-on, so I subconsciously come to you for help. He raised his head and looked at Chun Pippi, saying self-mockingly, I really want to enter the second floor, but I really don't have the confidence to defeat Longqing and become the only one. In the past 6 months, Chun Pippi had seen Ning-Kei improve step by step from an ordinary lad who didn't know what cultivation was to the current state. He had long believed that this friend of the same age as him was also a genius. Interestingly, Ning-Kei did not know this because he lacked a normal frame of reference. But Ning-Kei's time in the cultivation world was too short, not to mention compared with him. Even Prince Longqing was a mountain that he could not reach. Looking at Ning-Kei's self-deprecating expression, he had a strong feeling of sympathy. After a sigh, he forced a smile and said, Although it is difficult for a peerless genius like me to understand the troubles of ordinary people like you, but just like in the past 6 months, if you have any questions about cultivation, you can still ask me. In this case, there is not much difference whether you enter the second floor of the academy or not. Ning-Kei shook his head and replied, Like now, I am learning from you. So no matter how well I learn, I will never be able to surpass you. But what if I have the opportunity to learn from the headmaster? Hearing this, Chun Pippi's small eyes widened, and the little sympathy he had suddenly disappeared. He shouted angrily, Are you still not satisfied with reaching my level? Ning-Kei tiredly leaned back against the wall and closed his eyes. He was too lazy to say anything, and he looked extremely disappointed. Chun Pippi couldn't bear to look at him. His 2 tightened eyebrows under his smooth forehead suddenly raised, and he whispered, In fact, Those who can enter the second floor are not necessarily geniuses in cultivation. Sixth brother is a good blacksmith born from a good blacksmith. Ning Ke suddenly opened his eyes. Chun Pippi didn't look at him and continued to frown. The headmaster of the academy values a student's temperament the most. Every time the second floor opens, although the examination methods are different, they are all the same. So no matter how the examination is tomorrow, the first thing you have to do is to stay true to yourself and do this to the extreme. Then you may have a chance. The extreme? Ning Ke thoughtfully said to himself. It's late. Let's go back. Chun Pippi glanced at the spring night stars outside the west window and said, There are only a few hours left before the second floor opens. After returning to the old brushpin shop on Lynn 47th Street, Ning Ke couldn't fall asleep for a long time. He lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling above his head. His seemingly calm eyes actually hid nervousness and confusion, and his body also seemed a little tense because of nervousness. Even he himself couldn't explain why he had such a strong desire to enter the second floor of the academy. Perhaps it was because of the infinite yearning for the cultivation world since childhood. Years of hard work like last year, when he kept coughing up blood to climb the stairs, made every cell in his body love that world more and more. More because he finally stepped into that magical world last year and saw more strange scenery. He increasingly wanted to see more scenery. When people went through hardships to climb a dangerous peak and looked up, they would see a faintly higher peak among the white clouds in the distance. If they could overcome their fatigue, then they would always want to go to the higher peak and see more beautiful scenery that they had never seen before. Climbing the city tower to see the mountain scenery, climbing the high mountain to see the city scenery, sitting on the clouds to see the scenery of the world. This was what a worthwhile life should be like. Sang Sang sat on the edge of the bed and stared at his cheek. She held his hand with a little force, trying to pass some kind of strength to him. There was a forced but sincere smile on her dark face, trying to pass some kind of confidence to him. On this night, in the spring of the 14th year of Tianchi era, the whole Chang and city and even the whole world were paying attention to the opening of the second floor of the academy tomorrow. But no one knew how important this matter was to the ordinary lad who had been cruelly judged to be unable to cultivate since childhood, living in the back house of the shabby bookstore in the eastern city of Chang'an. Written on my birthday, revised on 201-11-210-2132. I spent this birthday alone in the hotel. It's a legend. I'll remember it. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come to vote for it. Your support is my biggest motivation. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.